Um, Good morning and welcome to the Telepsychology meeting, the California Board of Psychology. I believe that Ms. Pruteau is going to call roll.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Stephen Phillips,
Keep present.
Julie Nystrom,
Good morning. Here.
and Leah Tate.
Here.
Thank you. Complete.
Okay, well, we have a quorum of the committee. And as I said, welcome to this morning's meeting of the Telepsychology Committee. This meeting in particular has been convened in an effort to address some feedback that we received from the public and stakeholders that there was an interest in us revisiting the topic of the Telepsychology Pact as crafted by the Association for State and Provincial Psychology Boards. We had visited this topic before, and we are revisiting it again at the request of stakeholders. The board has made no decision one way or the other on this particular topic. But prior to kind of digging down into that topic, I did want to mention to people that, and as I was speaking with the moderator right at the beginning, meetings of the Board of Psychology are open to the public except where specifically noticed otherwise in accordance with the Open Meeting Act. The public may take appropriate opportunities to comment on any issue before the board or its committees at the time the item is heard, but the president or committee chair may, at his or her discretion, apportion available time among those who wish to speak. Board members who are present, who are not members of the committee, may observe but may not participate in the voting of this committee. I will also mention that when we do get to the public comment section, it would be very much appreciated if people did not overly duplicate remarks. We know that people have a great interest in this particular topic of PsyPact, but it is not necessary to continue as a form of advocacy for speaker after speaker after speaker after speaker to say the exact same thing. If, for instance, somebody prior to you has commented in a way with which you agree and you have no additional information to add to the discussion, you can simply indicate during your comment that you join in the remarks of a preceding speaker. That'll allow us to be the most efficient today and give the most opportunity for people who do want to comment to participate, and yet for us to move forward with the committee's agenda. Okay, well, with that in mind, we are going to move to agenda item number 3, which is to establish the goals and mission of the Telepsychology Committee. Each of the committees of the Board of Psychology have been having discussions about the name of the committee to see if it is appropriate to the purpose of the committee, and also to create some kind of statement of purpose and mission for that particular committee. The Telepsychology Committee has not yet done this, and I'm going to suggest, as long as the other board members are in agreement, that the Telepsychology Committee should probably be called the Telepsychology Committee. I don't think there's a need for a different name unless there are other board members who feel to the contrary. I know that Ms. Sorek, you've worked on some language for purposes of the mission of the committee, or maybe perhaps it was Mr. Burke, I'm not sure. But in any event, whoever drafted the language, if they would like to kind of roll out that language for us so that we can consider it, I would appreciate it.
I'm just pulling it up. Bear with me.
I can read it out loud if you'd like.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Is there any way to put this up on a white screen or some kind of...
I will copy and paste it into the chat, and then
Okay, great.
We can try and do it from there.
Okie doke.
This is the moderator. Antoinette, if you'd like, I can have you share your screen if that would be easier.
Or you know what? I will put it into Teams, and if you can copy and paste it from there.
Um,
Oh, that dreaded Teams.
right. I'm using a separate laptop for Teams. That's why I hesitate.
Is there a way to do it in the WebEx?
Well, I could have you share your screen, make you the presenter, or I could open up the chat. Shall I just open up the chat? Would you prefer that?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, let me just open that up.
Because
Okay,
it's in
while
an
you-
email. So,
Okay,
you
the
folk-
chat is,
perfect.
yep.
Okay,
It's
there
in
it
the
is.
Okay. I'm going to read the language. I'm not looking at the chat at the moment because I've got too many screens or too many tabs open. But this committee is responsible. This was the language that was proposed. This committee is responsible for developing regulatory language for the practice of psychology that is conducted remotely within the state of California and interstate practice that is conducted remotely.
And just to add some context, this was the language that the board reviewed and approved prior to our sunset. So this is in our sunset document as well as the administrative procedure manual for the board, but this is in no way a static mission of this committee. So it's just something to work from that the board has already seen and approved.
Do the committee members have any comments on the proposed language or the name of the committee? Would a committee member like to make a motion regarding the name of the committee and the mission statement?
Nystrom here, and I will make a motion to retain the name of the Telepsychology Committee and continue with the purpose of the Telepsychology Committee as outlined in the sunset.
And I'll second that.
Okay. Is there any committee comment? Okay, I'm going to open this up to public comment. Just restrict your comment to the topic of the committee name and mission.
All right.
Moderator, will you open chat?
All right. I'm going to momentarily close the chat so I can open up the Q&A panel and there's no confusion. So
Okay.
the question and answer panel is now available. If any member of the public would like to comment on this agenda item, please type in the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. I would like to make a comment and submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions for your reference, and we'll give you a moment. This is the moderator, and at this time, I'm seeing no requests for public comment. Mr. Chair, would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's closed.
Dr. Phillips, this is Board Counsel Will McGuire. Hi, good morning. Hi.
Good morning.
Good morning. I just wanted to throw a question out. I'm not quite a member of the public, but a question for the committee. Today, for example, I think we're looking at potential model legislation. So, and I don't know what the intent is for future meetings, but would we potentially want to amend the mission statement to include not just developing regulatory language, but also regulatory, legislative, or other procedural procedures for the practice of psychology, something of that nature?
Ms. Rourke, how do you react to that idea?
I think it's a great idea. I think it expands the scope of the telepsychology committee in making recommendations to the full board. We do have a section in the general provisions of the BNP dealing with telehealth. That's always an option SIPACT would require statutory change as well. But I like the idea of also considering any kind of procedural or, internal amendments to address telehealth. So I like the idea.
Mr. McGuire, did you have specific language in mind?
As I was kind of just stating it on the fly, I think I would recommend, I guess, the amendment to the motioner to amend it to as follows. This committee is responsible for developing statutory and regulatory language and or internal procedures for the practice of psychology that is conducted remotely, and then continues as was stated previously. And I'm open to specific wordsmithing or changes of commas and things like that. But basically, the tenets being adding statutory as well as including regulatory, and then adding internal procedures or procedures. I'm not sure how Ms. Sorick and team like to refer to those.
I like the language that you used.
Okay, so the committee is responsible for developing statutory and regulatory language and or internal procedures. And it does say currently for the practice of psychology. Do we want to stay, in support of the practice of psychology, or just keep it general and safe?
I think for the practice of psychology. Are the moving party and the seconding party open to that amendment?
I'm comfortable with that.
Ms. Tate?
That works for me.
Okay. And Ms. Sorick, did you have any concerns about that particular language?
I like it.
Okay, me too. Then why don't we move ahead with a roll call on the motion?
Should we ask if the public has any concerns with that change?
Oh, with a change? Okay. We can reopen public comment at this time if you have a concern with that particular change.
All right, this is a moderator, and I have reopened the question and answer panel. So if any member of the public would like to comment, please type, "I would like to make a comment," using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, and submit it to all panelists. All right, this is a moderator. I see. I just have someone who typed no comments. So I'm guessing they just don't have any comments. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right, I'll do that.
And for those of you that are participating, it's not necessary to tell us that you don't have a comment. You can only, why don't you only tell us some of the circumstances where you do have a comment? But I do appreciate Mr. Leatherberry's thoroughness in making that comment. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and call the roll? Ms. Pruteau?
Nystrom,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Tate.
Aye.
Well, that was a cliffhanger. Sounds like we have unanimous motion or movement on the part of the committee. So that will be the name and mission of the Telepsychology Committee. Okay, so moving on. Item number 4 is for public comment for items not on the agenda. I want to emphasize that for items not on the agenda. So if you're participating today in order to make comments on the SIPACT or ASPPB's proposal or the board's action on it, those are items that are already on the agenda, so it would not necessarily be making a comment here. So it's public comment for items not on the agenda. And I will remind the committee members and myself, the committee may not discuss or take action on any matter raised during this public comment section, except to decide whether to place the matter on the agenda of a future committee meeting. And with that in mind, are there any, Ms. Moderator, could you open the panel for public comment for those that have comment for items not on the agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have opened up the Q&A panel, so if any member of the public would like to make a comment, please type that they would like to make a comment and submit it to all panelists. I do see we have one member of the public, Natalie Feinblatt, that would like to make a comment. So Natalie, I'll let you know when you've been unmuted. All right, Natalie, you have been unmuted.
Thank you. I have two questions. I think they're quick. Number one, I know this meeting is being recorded. Will that recording be available after the meeting? And if so, how?
It'll be available on our, there'll be a link on our website, the recording. I don't know how many days it takes for the recording to go up. Ms. Soren?
The website, meaning like where the agenda is, or?
Where the agenda is.
Okay, great. And then my second question is, has the Telepsychology Committee had any meetings so far this year that the public could have attended, or is this the first one?
This is the first meeting.
Awesome. Thank you.
We're a committee of 3 people, so we have to give, we have to have public meetings. That's part of the design of having 3 committee members, and is a requirement under California state law.
Mr. Sanchez, can I ask you to let us know when this will be available, the recording? I know that you are recording it for the WebEx.
This is Will Wire, Board Counsel. While he's looking at that, I just wanted to note for the commenter that on the webpage where the agendas and times are listed, what you're looking for as far as the recording is titled in the category webcast in the far right column.
Thank you, Mr.
So, yeah, so it won't say recording, but it will say webcast once it's available.
Maybe we can get that information from Mr. Sanchez and provide it at a later time during the meeting. There are no further public comments I can see. So, Ms. Moderator, or is there?
No, we just mark them as answered verbally once people have made their comments. So there are no additional comments, so I can go ahead and close that for you.
I would appreciate it.
Okay, it's closed.
Okay, item number 4 is a presentation on the part of the Association for State and Provincial Psychology Boards on the subject of SIPAC as it exists now. SIPAC standing for the Psychology Interjurisdictional Compact, which was created by was modeled by the representatives of the Association of State and Provincial Psychology Boards, which will hereinafter be called ASPPB. With us today is Ms. Janet Orwig. She's the Associate Executive Officer for Member Services. Thank you for making yourself available to present this material, Ms. Orwig. And if you're ready, we are ready to listen to your presentation.
Hello, thank you for allowing me to have time to present on the Psychology Interjurisdictional Compact, or SIPAC. And I'd kind of like today to just present a broad overview as well as a brief history of the compact itself, and then also to address areas that were requested by the committee to be covered during my presentation. To start with, as we said, SIPAC was created by the Association of State and Provincial Psychology Boards, and it was created based on feedback from our member boards. ASPPB is the association made up of psychology boards across the United States and Canada, and currently we have 65 members. SIPAC is designed to regulate the day-to-day practice of telepsychology across state boundaries, as well as address temporary in-person face-to-face practice of psychology for up to 30 days annually. So how it kind of works is that states enact the SIPAC legislation. the commission is formed, and psychologists wanting to practice under the authority of SIPACT will need to apply and meet criteria established by the SIPACT Commission. The authority to practice interjurisdictional telepsychology, or the APIT, is issued by the Commission. It requires as one of its components an ASPPB e-passport, and that would allow the psychologist to practice telepsychology into a receiving state. If the psychologist wish to do temporary authorization to practice, that would be in, or the TAP, which is issued by the Commission, that requires as one of its component an ASPPB interjurisdictional practice certificate, and that allows them to conduct temporary in-person face-to-face practice up to 30 days in a distant state. So the SIPACT Commission requirements do require an acceptable degree in psychology, a current unrestricted license. They also require that you have an active passport, no adverse action, and then to meet other criteria as established by the Commission. The e-passport and the IPC, or interjurisdictional practice certificate, are ASPPB certificates. The Commission has an agreement with ASPPB to provide vetting for the e-passport and the IPC, as well as ASPPB sets the e-passport and IPC requirements. So a little brief history that I wanted to kind of hit on was that, as said, this is a creation of ASPPB. The ASPPB Board of Directors approved SIPACT's model language, in February of 2015. The first state to enact SIPACT was Arizona in May of 2016. And all licensing compacts have a magic number, which is a number that they have to reach in order to become operational. For SIPACT, that was 7. So when Georgia enacted SIPACT legislation in April of 2019, we were able to become fully operational and have our first commission meeting in July of 2019. We opened up applications in July 6th, applications July 1st of 2020, and we were able to issue our first APIT, or Authority to Practice Interjurisdictional Telepsychology, in July 6, 2020. So kind of as a recap, we became operational when we had 7 states. The Commission is the governing body for SIPACT. It is a joint governmental agency of the member states. As each new state enacts the legislation, they join the Commission. Each state has one participating representative, and the Commission is in charge of doing the bylaws, the rules, the policies, the day-to-day management of the compact. So some of the areas that I was asked to cover in my presentation dealt with benefits for our goals for SIPACT. And so for the consumer, it increases client-patient access to care. It facilitates continuity of care when client and patients relocate. Good example of this deals with students going away to college, or either coming back home from college and being able to keep those mental health relationships once they have relocated. It also has helped with professionals that have specific or special expertise. We've seen that come up in language, that someone speaks a certain language, and helping to be able to get consumers associated with that professional. It also offers a higher degree of consumer protection across state lines. It allows the consumer to know when and how to file a complaint. It also sets mechanisms for the states to work together to address any complaints that come as through SIPACT. Some of the benefits for the psychologist are very similar to the same thing, except that it does provide ease of practice for them. They do not have to get licensed in every other compact state, and it also allows them the ability to readily know any legal requirements, such as, especially involving temporary practice. The allowances by states regarding temporary practice are vary greatly from state to state. And by having this set up at 30 days, the psychologist knows they can go in and do 30 days worth of temporary services annually. One of the other things that we have found is that the Department of Defense has taken on SIPACT as one of their initiatives. We've actually been one of their main initiatives for several years now. They feel that this SIPACT provides valuable services to the military. A couple of things to highlight is that the allows for various services being provided in various military events, such as the DoD Yellow Ribbon Reintegration events. And it also allows spouses of military personnel to be able to maintain their client base as they relocate, if there are both relocations are going to be in compact states. So one of the other areas was to talk about our current status and our progress. Currently, we have 21 jurisdictions that have enacted the legislation. We have active legislation in 11 more, and 3 of those are actually sitting on the governor's desk. And the other thing that was asked to kind of talk about was the experiences of adopting the legislation. So I'm going to kind of use the 2021 legislative experience to talk about that. I have a feeling that due to COVID, we were seeing a lot of bills introduced. This is actually our largest legislative session to date. We did at one point have 20 bills that had been introduced. As I said, 6 of those were enacted. We have 3 on the state governor's desk, and we still have 8 that are active. However, we did have 3 that failed to move on. Indiana had a large fiscal note attached to all of the compact bills that were going through, and it was done right at the end of the session, and we were not able to address that prior to the session ending. It did impact psychology as well as the audiology speech compact as well. In New Mexico, we were tabled in the Senate Judiciary Committee, as was all of the other compact bills that were introduced this year in New Mexico. And in Washington, legislation did not pass out of the House of Origin by the cutoff date. In addition to those challenges, some of the challenges that we have seen through the years involve either SIPAC legislation being added to a controversial bill or another bill being added to SIPAC, and because of that, the legislation failed to move forward. With that said, in some cases that has been a success for us in that we have been added to some telehealth bills or other budget bills and have seen the legislation go through. So it really kind of depends on the current environment of policies and political nature of a state as we're moving through. In 2015, January of 2015, the California board did review SIPAC when we were just getting started, and they did provide us a letter with 6 concerns, and a lot has changed since that 2015 letter, and so I'd kind of like to address some of those concerns now and kind of give an update on how that has progressed. The first one dealt with commission cost and the assessment of fees. Since the time that we originally talked in 2015, the rules have been written to address this. And one of those is Rule 10.2, which covers the annual assessment. And it is that a state would be charged $10 per authorization holder licensed in your home state up to $6,000. And so they would have to declare California as the home state, and then you would be assessed a $10 fee for that psychologist. If you have one, you get $10. That's it, but up no more than a maximum per year of $6,000. The other issue that came up in the letter was promulgation of rules. Each state has a representative that sits at the table during the rule sessions. Rules of SIPAC are only applicable to telepsychology and/or temporary practice for those working or authorized under the authority of SIPAC, and the compact language does not authorize the compact commission to develop rules beyond the scope of that compact language. The third concern in the letter dealt with emergency rules, and there are only 4 incidences where an emergency rule can take place. And so when you're looking at that, they are to meet imminent danger or threat to public health, safety, or welfare, prevent loss of a commission or compact state funds, meet a deadline for promulgation of an administrative rule that is established by federal law or rule, or to protect public health and safety. Since the letter, we have Rule 1.8 that defines the process. and also gives within 90 days of enacting any type of emergency rule, we must comply with all the other requirements under Rule 1, which involve rulemaking procedures. All compacts have language covering some type of emergency rule needs. The fourth bullet dealt with the coordinated database, and the language, the model language, has a laundry list of items that would need to be included in the database. As we have progressed and defined our processes and developed our rules, Rule Point 9.4 really further defines what's actually needed. And part of that involves the reporting of the disciplinary data system, as well as licensure verification. We have been able to, through licensure verification, obtain that from licensing boards' websites. So we would be able to obtain that information from the California board site, so there would be no additional requirement for that. And then the disciplinary data system, California already reports to, so there would be no additional information needed for that aspect either. The fifth bullet dealt with continuing education. And a concern at that time that not all states required continuing education. They now do require in some manner, as well as the e-passport has added a requirement of requiring 3 hours per year at renewal. The final bullet in the letter dealt with reporting significant investigatory information, and that has been further defined in the Rule 2, which is the definition of what significant investigatory information is, and 7.4 as to how it would be added. And then the policy talks about how it is viewed. And the reason this is added is so that someone can't change their home state while they're in investigation in another compact state. It does not impact their ability to practice under SIPAC. They just, unless they go through to final disciplinary action, but while they're under investigation, they just cannot change their home state. One of the other areas that I was asked to present on was kind of looking at early SIPAC adopters to states coming on now, and how does that relate between the two. When we first started SIPAC, we really kind of had two camps. The early adopters that wanted to sit at the table and help write and get the compact going, and then we had some that wanted to wait until it was further defined and see what came out of the model language and how it was interpreted into the rules. At the first commission meeting held in July in 2019, we did end up having 11 states present because we had that much additional legislation introduced. At that meeting, the bylaws were created and some implementation rules were created that would help us get up and going. Additional meetings have happened since then. Rules continue to be developed, policies have been created, and we recently established our standing committees. But I think it's important to note that even as ongoing states come on, we do an annual assessment of the SIPAC states. We contact the commissioners, the boards, and even SIPAC staff ourselves get to provide feedback, input into the rules, the questions they're getting. Is there clarification in rules that are needed? Are there additional rules that are needed? And that will be reported back to the Rules Committee. And they will review this feedback, identify any potential rules that need to be added, any current rules that need to be changed. And their recommendation will be taken to the full commission at their meeting for voting. I think it's also important to point out that all rules go out for public comment before any action is taken on them by the commission. We do try to keep the SIPAC website updated. It does contain information about the commissioner, the commission meetings, agendas, minutes. We are open to the public. All of our meetings are open to the public. We had a Rules Committee meeting earlier this week, and we have an executive board meeting later this week on the 26th. You will be able to find information about that meeting there. We also have frequently asked questions on our website, as well as a mechanism for applying or entering into a listserv that we would provide you with additional information as it goes forward. And that is all of my presentation, but I am open for any questions from the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Orwick. First, we're going to open this up to questions from the committee members, and I can get the ball rolling. And I'll start with the issue that seems to have attracted the most attention recently here in California. And that is, maybe you can help me understand this, Ms. Orwig. The Model Act, as I understand it, indicates that people that attend regionally accredited graduate schools were considered to be eligible for purposes of SIPAC. But if I also understand correctly, the actual rules for getting the temporary practice certificate or to get the e-passport require that people have graduated from the American Psychological Association or Canadian Psychological Association accredited program. Can you help us to better understand why there's two different standards there?
So the language itself is very similar to statute language, and it's very broad. And when we got into the rules, and actually the criteria that mentions APA, CPA, as well as ASPPB National Register Joint Designation is not in the SIPAC language. It is part of the e-passport requirements that were created by ASPPB. I do want to say that ASPPB did bring this to the commission, and in January of 2020, the commission reviewed this request and felt that it did not impact current SIPAC states. And part of the reasoning of that was that all states accept APA accreditation. They may not require it, but they all accept it. And so it gave a standard platform for going forward, as you are very much aware, I am sure, the licensing requirements vary greatly from state to state. So setting some kind of platform was very helpful. And so that is how that got added to the e-passport and the IPC.
Is that a permanent act?
It is. I have learned a long time ago that nothing is ever permanent, but that it is something that will be being reviewed. We have had different letters coming in, and the commission has reviewed them. They have another letter for the agenda for the executive board at their month in May. We will continue to review this. As I said in my presentation about rules, they are fluid, and things get changed as the profession changes or as the needs change.
Okay. The second question I had with you is about cost sharing, and you were talking a bit about the cost assessment that a state would pay depending on the number of licensees. Our particular concern in our letter was if the board would be undertaking certain administrative tasks in order to help SIPAC, if we were to join SIPAC, in order to help the commission to perform its functions. But as far as we could tell, there was no mechanism for sharing any of the fees received for purposes of people belonging to SIPAC to come to the board in which they were, the board which we were dictating was their home state. And that poses a particular problem in California, and that is that our legislature is very sensitive to not passing any provisions that would create additional burdens on state government without having a concomitant source of revenue. So is there any anticipated revenue sharing in the sense that revenue would be shared by the commission with the boards?
Not at this time. There is in the rule the opportunity to not have an assessment fee right now, because we are trying to get up and going. The commission will look at that every year, and that can be is not a standard requirement. It's not something we have to do. The commission has the right to say this year we are fluid and we expect to be fluid, and we can not require an assessment fee, but there has not been any discussion about cost sharing between the states and the commission.
I appreciate that. Are there questions from other committee members?
I have a question, and this kind of piggybacks on Dr. Phillips' question.
Would you like to identify yourself, Ms. Tate?
I was just about to. Hello, I'm Leah Tate. But thank you. Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Orwig. I appreciate that. And it did provide a lot of clarity. but I just want to reiterate, or have you reiterate, when Dr. Phillips was asking about the APA accreditation, you said it was fluid and things change, but there's nothing, the wording stands as is currently. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, just checking. Thank you so much.
Hi, this is Board Member Nystrom. Ms. Orrig, thank you for your time today and your presentation. I do have a couple of questions. One, of the states that have adopted, I'm curious how many participants in the states have signed up. And really my question is, I mean, it goes to the question of how has access to care increased?
So we have roughly seeing between 3 and 4% of the licensees that are available in each state. Some states are a little higher, some states are a little lower, utilizing the services. That being said, we have been quite innovative with applications and are still processing. So that number could go up. That is strictly of the applications that we have processed and are able to use that information. We still have quite a few to come through to be processed. So we're working on them, but right now we're seeing about 3 to 4% of the licensees that are available in each state applying.
Okay, I appreciate that. And one of my other questions has to do with as you were processing the background on the licensees. You know, in the state of California, we would do like criminal background checks. How are you guys looking at the criminal background checks?
So we are not, the language requires that the licensing board conduct background checks at your point of licensure. The commission just has that as a requirement so that all the states are on the same playing field with that going forward. The commission does not see the background checks. We do not evaluate them. We're not allowed to. That is strictly as part of your licensure process, but we did have it in as a requirement so that all the states would be conducting those.
Okay, I appreciate that. That helps me better understand. I think that's all I have at the moment. Thank you.
I have a couple of additional questions, Ms. Orwig. One is, of the states that have joined SIPACT, do any of them recognize regionally accredited graduate schools for purposes of licensure?
I believe they all have that as a requirement. Some they require APA or CPA and joint designation, and then some have an equivalency mechanism to review applications against APA or CPA accreditation. So we have kind of a variety sitting at the table.
So you do have states that accept people based purely on regionally accredited graduate schools that are comfortable with the concept of excluding part of their licensing population?
I do. I'm not positive. I believe I have one that sits at my table that has just regional accreditation. The majority have, I have a few that have requirement for APA, but the majority of them have an equivalence review as well as part of their licensure process.
Okay. So those states have been comfortable with excluding part of their licensing population? Or are you saying that the equivalency process allows them to be treated as if they were APA accredited graduates?
No, they would be reviewed on the APA, CPA, and designated qualifications at the ePassport or IPC level, regardless of the equivalence that was done at their licensure. And those states, when we brought this forward to the commission, felt that it did not impact their current participation in the program.
Okay. That's of particular concern in our state, where estimates vary fairly widely, but anywhere between 5 and 30% of our licensees come from regionally accredited graduate schools that are not APA or CPA accredited. So we have perhaps a unique problem in California that I think is going to be the subject of discussion today. So I wanted to make you aware of that and see if you had any substantive response in anticipation of the public comments.
I really have nothing to add to that at this point. I will take it back for review. Like I said, the executive board is having a meeting later this month, and I will be sharing the presentation here as well as the comments and questions.
Okay. And as far as access of the consumer goes, I suppose the idea would be if we were to join SIPACT, and our primary concern as a board is obviously the protection and the promotion of the well-being of consumers of psychological services in California. I suppose the idea would be they would have access to additional care, because if we were to join SIPACT, there would be additional practitioners they could access through the SIPACT system. Is that correct?
That is correct. And they would also be allowed to continue services if they leave the state of California.
Right. I guess the other thing that we should consider, and it's probably of interest to the public that has joined us for the meeting today, and they're very welcome to have joined us, and we're excited to see the extent of the interest in the board's business, would be that if someone practiced within the state of California and they were performing teletherapy within the state of California, the e-passport would have nothing to do with that. Is that correct?
That is correct. It is strictly and it's a volunteer. If they want to do tele between California and Oregon and just get licensed there, SIPACT doesn't impact that either. So it is strictly what you do inside your state. SIPACT doesn't address, and it's voluntary. Psychologists may not want to that be expanded. They may only have one state and that they want to deal with services. It is not required to join SIPACT. If you enact SIPACT, your licensees still have that as a volunteer option.
Right. And so it's a voluntary option that allows for interstate practice between states that belong to the compact.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that clarification. Are there other board questions or comments? Hearing none, I would like to open this up for public comment. If you would like to make a public comment on Ms. Orwig's presentation, we would certainly welcome you to do so. Again, as I mentioned before, if you are just going to repeat a point that's been made by a previous speaker for purposes of expediting our proceedings today and allowing as many people to participate as possible, we would ask that if your comment is duplicative of a prior comment, that you simply say you join in those comments. But we can't, we're not going to cut you off for speaking, but for purposes of advocacy, several people repeating the same argument doesn't make the argument any more persuasive. With that in mind, I'd like the moderator, if she will, to open up the public comment section or the question and answer box. And then we will wait till everyone's had an opportunity to say that they would like to make a comment in order to determine how many speakers approximately we're going to have in the public comment section. And at that point, we'll allocate time that would be available to you for your public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a moderator, and I have opened up the question and answer panel. So if anyone would like to make a comment, they may type, "I would like to make a comment," using the field in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions, and I am looking, and already we have, looks like about 5 requests for comment. I don't know if we'd like to limit the time to 2 minutes or
Let's give a few more minutes for people to type into that box.
okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Hey, Dr. Phillips, this is Will McGuire again, Board Counsel. I had just a couple questions, if you wouldn't mind. I could either ask them now or after the public comment, if it's the pleasure of the chair.
While we're waiting for the question and answer, for people to join by way of the question and answer to indicate they want to comment, why don't you go ahead and ask your questions?
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'll try to keep it brief. Good morning, Ms. Erwig. This is Will McGuire, Board Counsel. So I just wanted to thank you again for coming today and offering this helpful presentation and the materials as well. So one very quick question is, in reference to ASPPB and SIPACT, how are those organized as legal entities? Are they an LLC, a corporation, a partnership, a nonprofit, a for-profit, any of those above, or some other entities?
So ASPPB is a 501c6, and the commission is considered a semi-quasi-government. It is separate from ASPPB. That being said, there is a memorandum of understanding that the commission has entered into with ASPPB to help fund currently staffing, overhead, computer software, things like that. But they are total separate entities. Once the commission was set, it is now functioning as a freestanding entity of its own.
Okay, so ASPPB is a 501c6, which is, I take it, a form of a nonprofit. Is that right?
Correct.
And you said that SIPACT is a quasi-government?
It's considered a member, a quasi-government entity made up of member states. It cannot incorporate because of the way that it's made up, and so it functions similar to a licensing board because it is made up of members from the licensing boards across the country.
I see. Yeah, thanks. And it's one of several interstate compacts that exist in the country.
It is. The grandfather, I guess, of all of them has been the nursing compact. There are now compacts for physical therapy, medicine, us. Audiology and speech has reached their 10 magic number, so they will be starting to get set up. There's also a compact for counseling, as well as emergency management, and there's another one I'm forgetting, occupational therapy.
Okay, thanks. And just switching gears a little bit onto the model legislation, if states were to consider adopting the model legislation, do they need to adopt that verbatim or largely verbatim, or is there significant flexibility built in for individual state legislatures to tailor the enacting legislation to suit their individual needs and preferences?
They need to enact it in as close to its model language as possible. We do realize that there are formatting changes that need to be made to fit into a state's formatting model, as well as whether you call it an article or something like that. And if there is an item in there that is unconstitutional in a state, they can make changes to that. Any other changes we would like to have feedback on to say whether or not that makes a substantive change to the language. Some of them may not, but that way we can kind of go back and forth with what the changes are and will it impact the enactment of the legislation once you go to sit to the commission.
Okay, thank you. And I just have one more question. I apologize, it's sort of a multi-part question, but it's intended to be somewhat open-ended for you to talk about the disciplinary process in the model legislation or in the SIPACT in general. So
okay.
Can you describe for us the disciplinary and complaint process? And related to that, do you use the administrative law process of a particular state? What due process rights do the licensees have? And do you have disciplinary guidelines? And since you mentioned that states work together when there's a conflict or a complaint, I should say, how do you deal with conflicts of law between different states? So that's the multi-part question. You can tackle it.
That is a lot.
Yeah, I know. It's the last one I've got.
We do have rules that have outlined the disciplinary the discipline process. The home state is responsible because the psychologist is practicing under the home state authority. However, the receiving state can do a cease and desist or an injunction and stop that person from being able to practice within their state. And then the two states can work together to proceed with that disciplinary action. We are in the process of drafting some rules. That was one of the things the Rules Committee did this earlier this week to firm up scope of practice and what that means in regard to the receiving state. and how that would address differences in laws such as duty to warn, record keeping. So the Rules Committee is working on that. They will be presenting that to the Executive Board and then on to the Commission later this year.
Did you want to break up the questions, Mr. McGuire?
I can maybe revisit one that I don't know if was touched on. Just the so let's say you're a licensee and someone makes a complaint against you. Can you just kind of describe the process? Like, for example, in our world, there's an investigation, and then maybe there's an accusation, and maybe they go to hearing, and then the board ultimately makes a decision on it. Is it that similar process, or is it something different?
All of the discipline is going to be handled at the state level, how you handle your disciplines now. SIPAC and the Commission do not do that. The Commission language, or the SIPAC language, gives you a vehicle for the two states to work together, where that may not exist currently. It also allows the receiving state to do an injunction or a cease and desist where they may not have that available now. But your process for discipline inside the state is the same. SIPAC does not change that.
Okay, just to clarify, so the receiving state could bring an action for injunctive relief within the home state?
No, within their state. They can
within their state. Okay.
And tell the psychologist they can no longer practice under SIPAC into their state.
Okay, that makes more sense to me. I was a little confused by what I thought I heard and what you're saying, so I appreciate the clarification. Okay, Madam Moderator, how many public comments do we appear to have at this point?
Mr. Chair, we have 7 requests for public comment, and one of those is a repeat, so I suspect the person just wasn't sure if their first request went through.
Okay.
Do we want...
So I think we'll restrict people to 3 minutes time.
Okay.
So they're making their comments, and the comments are to be on this agenda item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So our first request for public comment is from Dr. Joe Linder-Crow. Dr. Linder-Crow, I'll let you know when you've been unmuted. And just a reminder, you have 3 minutes. I will give you a 30-second warning. And Dr. Linder-Crow, you've been unmuted.
Hi, thank you. This is Dr. Joe Linder-Crow. I'm the CEO of the California Psychological Association. Hi, Ms. Orwig. Welcome to California, virtually anyway. I know I have 3 minutes, but I had a couple of questions. Our board of directors has not taken any kind of position on SIPAC at this time, and this is very helpful to have some clarification. So I hope that we can have an opportunity to get the clarification we need in order to fully assess this. I wanted to clarify one more time, Janet, that the model, and this is really helpful to me because I've been going through the model legislation, all of the documents, the compact language, and I did not see anywhere a reference to the requirement for APA accreditation. And then I wondered if it was in the e-passport, which you have clarified that is where that was made. Can you clarify once again the timing of that, and again the justification for putting that kind of requirement in? And the reason I ask is that it now seems that if we should move forward with legislation, the legislation would not require APA accreditation, but because e-passport is required to participate in SIPAC, is that where the requirement is? Could you just clarify that one more time? I want to be absolutely sure that we're getting this right.
That is correct. The model language is very broad, as like we said, is in regard to statute language, and it does require that you have an e-passport in the model language. The e-passport criteria was established by ASPPB. And part of the consideration going forward as to why that was added was looking at what all of the states required, allow, and need, and it looked like everybody allowed APA accreditation. So we could set a standard that all of the states coming on could say, okay, this is going to be the bar, and this is what we're going to have going forward. And so that is where it got the conversation. ASPPB Mobility Committee, the ASPPB Board of Directors did look at this. They also did solicit input from the SIPAC Commission because it does strongly impact us as to what they do with the passport. And at that time, as I said in the January 2020 meeting when it was discussed, the consensus of the commission was that it would not impact or negatively impact any of the current sitting SIPAC states.
So there is a great difference, and I'm sure you can appreciate the great difference between allowing and requiring. So
Correct.
Here, that in California, I believe that what this would say then is that the e-passport requirements would supersede the requirements that our own Board of Psychology has set for being licensed in the state of California. So licensure in the state of California is not good enough for participating in SIPAC. And I just want to point to once again what Dr. Phillips was saying, and that is that
30
this
seconds.
would disenfranchise or disaffect quite a large number of people in California. So my last question is to go back to what you said. I want to be clear on this as well. I believe you said that there may be an opportunity with the commission to change the rules if California decided that to move forward with SIPAC, there would be an opportunity to change the rules so that the rules in California would be modified. Is that what I heard you say?
The rules in California would not be modified. They would not be able to touch what you require in California. That is outside of the purview of SIPAC. What would be is that if California was sitting at the table, they can bring their concerns, they can have a conversation, and if it's the purview of the commission to make changes, they can. However, as I said, the e-passport comes from ASPPB. So we do have a reviews requirement committee that works in conjunction with ASPPB. And so they would get together and discuss this and make a recommendation back to the commission, as well as making a recommendation back to ASPPB.
All right, our next request for public comment is from Karen Leslie Fowler. And Karen, you'll have 3 minutes. You've been unmuted.
Thank you for hearing me today. I'm Karen Lise Fowler. I am a licensed psychologist, and I've been tracking SIPAC for many years now. I know some of the early objections, and we've all learned a lot about telehealth in the past year, but some of the early objections were worry that the care to consumers would be somehow inferior. And I'm just wondering, since SIPAC has now been active, if you have any information about the number of complaints there may have been to licensing boards of member states about psychologists practicing under SIPAC. And as a side note, we probably are going to be able to have a lot of other data about psychologists practicing under the temporary relaxations of requirements that various states have adopted during COVID.
So thank you for your question. We did, like I said, just start taking applications in July of 2020. I'm always a little leery to say this and put it out into the atmosphere, but as of this point, we have not had any complaints filed under for anyone practicing under the authority of SIPAC. So we're very thankful for that. And we will be gathering data as part of our ongoing process at renewal time for the e-passports as to how the services were being provided, where they were being provided. So we will be providing additional information, not in just how many are being done in each state, but what kind of practice has been done under SIPAC via the authority.
All right, our next request for comment is from Willow Pearson. And Willow, I'll let you know when you've been unmuted. And you will have 3 minutes. Willow, you have been unmuted.
Hello, good morning. Thank you for receiving my comments. My name is Dr. Willow Pearson, and I'm an associate professor at the California Institute of Integral Studies. I'm also a licensed psychologist in California. And I'd like to offer some comments to the committee and to Ms. Orwig in terms of this issue of APA accreditation that's highly concerning to our program and to a number of other innovative and creative graduate programs in our state. I'd like to read briefly in my 3 minutes from a letter that was offered from our clinical psychology chair, Renee Dumais. He speaks for our whole department, and this also supports a letter that Dr. Andrew Harlem, one of our professors, sent to the board, which we're also fully in support of. Essentially, our intent is to point to the committee and to Ms. Orwig the devastating impact that thousands of California licensees and hundreds of students who are currently earning their credentials to practice in the state would face. We believe that the adoption of PsyPact would place our students at a severe disadvantage within the psychology marketplace. Most of our students work in community mental health settings with socioeconomically disadvantaged individuals, minority communities, and marginalized groups. And our school department and clinicians have always been at the forefront of social justice in psychology, education, and practice. And we believe the public is best served by multiple voices, approaches, and interventions. So we're committed to the creation of new methodologies, innovative approaches, and culturally appropriate interventions. And we believe that California must continue to be committed to valuing and protecting educational models that integrate new areas and meet specific needs of California residents. So I just want to point to the specific law that we're attending to in this conversation, or need to be, the 2914 section 2, that states no educational institution shall be denied recognition at an accredited academic institution solely because its program is not accredited by any professional organization of psychologists, i.e. the APA, and nothing in this chapter or in the administration of this chapter shall require the registration within the board by educational institutions of their Department of Psychology or their doctoral programs in psychology. So as I say, we have a number of sister or universities and colleges that will be deeply affected by this, that we've listed in our letter, but we really want to state that it's really important that we see our institution and students as being unnecessarily discriminated against by PsyPac if it's carried through as planned. Thank you very much for your time and for listening to our strong concern about the.
Ms. Orwig, if you'd like to respond to that before we take the next public comment, you're welcome to.
Thank you for the comments. That you did present an issue that I have not currently been presented with. So I will definitely take this back to the commission for review. I believe the materials are available for me to get, so I could be able to get this letter and take it back to the commission. So thank you very much for bringing that to my attention.
All right, this is a moderator. Our next request for comment is from Elizabeth Winkleman. And again, Elizabeth, you'll have 3 minutes. I'll give you a 30-second warning. And Elizabeth, you've been unmuted.
Thank you. Hi, this is Dr. Elizabeth Winkleman. I'm the Director of Professional Affairs at the California Psychological Association. Ms. Orwig, thank you for the presentation. I'm going to follow up on one issue that's been very prominent, but also have a new question. And the follow-up is I'd like to know specifically, you can hear that many of our members are very concerned about the APA accreditation requirement to qualify. So I would like to know if you can describe exactly how such a change might be considered or pursued. You had initially said something about a member state can bring it to the table, but also said you'd bring it back. And I understand the ASPPB and the commission, the PsyPac commission, would have to consider it. So I'd like to know exactly what would be the process for that. And my second question has to do with telehealth corporations. So we want to have promote access to care for people in California, but we also want to protect the consumers and make sure that the quality of care is good. If I understand correctly, then only an individual psychologist can get the certification, the APIT. However, some concerns have also been raised about how this might affect large telehealth corporations coming in to California to provide services. In other words, they may get a lot of people who are licensed in one SIPAC state or various SIPAC states and kind of really come in a greater force into another SIPAC state such as California. So I'm wondering if you can comment on that and if there's been any experience with that so far in the member states. I know it's just been a short time. So thank you. Those are my two questions.
I will try to remember the first one, Will. So we do take information forward to the commission, and so like I said, they will have an executive board meeting at the end of this month. There are a couple of items that are on there that are addressing the APA CPA joint designation issue. So they will be reviewing that again at their meeting. And so that will go forward. It will also go forward to the next commission meeting from the executive board for them to consider. In the meantime, I believe that ASPPB is also reviewing and considering this requirement as well. But that's as far as as I know right now, it's just in the consideration phase. We really are trying to gather data and see how this requirement impacts, and that's why I appreciate all of the information that you are providing, how it impacts and what we can do and still be able to provide a good review process and vet the people that are wanting to come through here. Because one of the things I think it's very important to point out is that if you are practicing under SIPAC, you are not getting a license in one of those other SIPAC states. And so they're relying on the vetting of this requirement going forward. They don't get to see you, they don't get to license you, they don't, so it's that kind of deal that we're trying to make sure that we are still providing a good service and a good vetting process. Regarding the individuals, it can only be, SIPAC privileges only apply to an individual. They do not apply to any of their supervisees. They can't practice under someone else's authority of SIPAC. So if they have an individual issued SIPAC and become part of a larger group, that would probably be allowable. Have not seen that based on what we are seeing as far as the applications coming in and the organizations that we are hearing from. But I'm not sure I can say that absolutely if you had 6 people that had SIPAC, they couldn't form together and create a virtual group. I'm not, based on the way we are structured.
All right, our next request for public comment is from Charles Eckhart. And Charles, I'll let you know when you've been unmuted. And Charles, you've been unmuted. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. My name is Dr. Charles Eckhart. I'm a registered psychological assistant working towards licensure in the state of California and an adjunct faculty at Pacifica Graduate Institute's doctoral programs. I'm here on behalf of SCIAN, the Psychotherapy Action Network, and a group of licensed psychologists and graduate students who have, as to date, there are 588 of them who have signed a letter in opposition to SIPAC's position on APA accreditation. And along with the other voices, I'd like to state my support of Dr. Winkleman, Dr. Pearson, and Dr. Harlem's positions. And my hope is the board will share the letters that have been sent from a whole variety of psychologists in the state explicating their concerns with Ms. Orwig. So I'd like to support everything that's been said thus far and to add an additional concern. Ms. Orwig, are you familiar with any data that suggests that psychologists from APA accredited institutions provide more effective care on any standard? And my second question is, you mentioned that there are organizations for physical therapists, occupational therapists, nurses, and another profession I've forgotten that are interjurisdictional that serve as models for SIPACT. And I wanted to ask if those interjurisdictional quasi-governing bodies also restrict large amounts of practitioners licensed by state by regionally accredited programs, or if this is a unique situation for psychologists. Thank you.
Thank you. I am not aware of any data reviewing regional accredited versus APA programs at this time, so I can't really address that answer. The other compacts have probably very similar, but I think it is important to note that most of the other professions have a, I don't know how to put this, a standard that seems to appear across their states. That, you know, medicine has certain criteria, and their compact does require that you be board certified to be able to participate in their compact. PT has certain requirements that are consistent across their states, and so they make sure that you are compliant with those requirements. Occupational therapy actually does all of the licensing or certifying for all occupational therapists, so they set the criteria before you ever apply to a licensing board. So I think we are in a very unique situation in the variations of our laws across psychology that is not necessarily seen in the other professions, which makes their compacts maybe a little easier to address these standard areas.
All right, our next request for public comment is from Melody Schaefer. And Melody, I'll let you know when you have been unmuted. All right, Melody, you've been unmuted. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm Melody Schaefer. I'm chair of the California Psychology Internship Council Board. Thank you, Ms. Orwig, for an informative presentation. Much appreciated. KPIC is comprised of 26 doctoral programs. 10 of those are regionally accredited only. Another 16 have APA accreditation. And I'm speaking on behalf of the board and our constituency, which are quite concerned of the exclusionary criteria regarding the APA stipulation in applying for the individual SIPAC. It would diminish a significant amount of opportunities, we think, for California licensed psychologists who do not meet that criteria, and may even be viewed by some, which is brought to our attention, as a restraint on trade and an anticipation of significant financial damages to those excluded based on what could be looked as an interference with business advantage. As all states, as you had mentioned, Ms. Orrig, do have within their regulations and acceptance of regional accreditation for their programs, we would respectfully ask that this be taken into consideration by your board and appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, and we have a last request for comment from Colin Sears. Colin, I'll let you know when you've been unmuted. All right, Colin, you have been unmuted. You have 3 minutes.
Hello to everyone. This is Colin Suarez, Director of Government Affairs for the California Psychological Association. So I had 2 questions of Mrs. Orwig. The first is, what are the rules before SIPAC and your board for open meetings? California has some incredibly strong open meeting requirements for its boards and professional boards and other government institutions. So very curious to see what the equivalents are on your side for SIPAC. And the second is, do you know what the status is of mental health parity coverage for insurers in other SIPAC participating states? California just passed last year some of the strongest in the nation mental health parity laws, which would expand mental health coverage in the market to all of its insurance and health and managed healthcare plans, with the exception of ERISA plans. So I'm very curious to see what the market looks like if SIPAC were to be expanded in other states compared to the relatively large market that is California. Thank you.
Because we are considered a quasi-governmental agency, we do have public notice. We do schedule our meetings out 30 days. We provide our agenda 7 days in advance. If we have a special meeting notice, we have to do that within 24 hours, and the commission must meet 1 time per year. We also do the same thing with our executive board meetings and our committee meetings. They are scheduled 30 days in advance. As well as any proposed rules must go out for 60 days. Any emergency rules, as I discussed in my presentation, kind of have to have a 90-day, and they have to comply with whatever the standard rules are going forward. The Rules Committee will draft things within 30 days. All of our meetings are publicly attended. The links are available on our website, as well as any revisions to rules are not only put on the SIPAC website, they are put on every state that participates in SIPAC, so that you can also see what's going on in SIPAC on the state public sites for the compact SIPAC states. So we do have very strong public open meeting laws, as well as expanding it to be included with information on each of the SIPAC state websites. Regarding insurance, that has been a very interesting topic dealing with SIPAC as we have gotten up and going. We have been working with various insurance agencies, as well as practitioners that deal with telepractice and how to do that. We are working on an FAQ document to address those questions, and we have also been working with the insurance trust in regard to malpractice and how things are covered with that. So we are hoping to have a frequently questioned document available soon. As I said earlier, we have been setting up our standing committee. We have a training and public relations committee. They will be meeting in a couple of weeks, and they will be addressing that FAQ document and what other materials need to go on the SIPAC website to address a lot of the questions that we receive, not just insurance. We do receive some about licensing in our business licenses in other states, things like that. So we hope to be able to provide just some general information and pointing people in directions when we get to that document being available.
All right, this is the moderator, and that was the last request for public comment. Oh, I see that Colin Suarez has a follow-up comment. So Colin, I've unmuted you.
Okay, thank you. I apologize. I should have been more specific. I was not talking about insurance for the provider. I was talking about health coverage for mental health services and reimbursements through managed care plans and private insurance companies. Specifically, I was trying to get to the fact that California has some of the strongest statutory requirements for coverage of mental health services of patients, which would open up reimbursement rates and non-private pay for those providers who are operating in mental and behavioral health services in California. So I was attempting to determine if there is commensurate laws in other SIPAC participating states that would ensure mandatory reimbursements for mental and behavioral health consults, including telepsychology, in SIPAC participating states commensurate to what California has. Thank you.
I believe the best information regarding that question is probably going to be found with APA. They do keep up with the insurance rates and parity laws across the country. That is kind of a little outside of SIPAC's purview, but I do believe APA provides that information. We also work with the American Telemedicine Association, and I know they are working on some documents that will provide some additional information about insurance coverage as well. And so checking out their website might be helpful as also.
All right, this is a moderator, and that was the last request for public comment. Mr. Chair, would you like me to go ahead and close the Q&A panel?
Yes, if you would, please.
All right, it's closed.
Ms. Warwick, I'm going to ask you to bear with us. It's been quite a while that we've been speaking now, and I'm sure people would enjoy having a restroom break. So we're going to take a 5-minute break now, and if you could make yourself available after that break, for any additional questions from board members, I would certainly appreciate it.
Thank you. I would be glad to.
Thank you. Now take a 5-minute break. We will return at 11:29. Okay, it is now 11:29 and we'll reconvene for purposes of completing the presentation on SIPAC by Ms. Orwig of ASPPB. Did the board members have any additional questions they wanted to ask at this juncture of Ms. Orwig before we move on to the next agenda item? Either folks aren't back from break or they have no questions. Give them one more minute. I do see a hand up from Mr. Sanchez. Did you have a response, Mr. Sanchez, as to our question on the recording? So we're safe in assuming that within 2 weeks of today that it'll probably be up on our website. I didn't know we were on YouTube. Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate that clarification. Were there any other questions from board members of Ms. Orwig?
None here. Thank you.
Okay. I want to thank you, Ms. Orwig, for joining us today to make this presentation to help us better understand the particulars of SIPACT and taking time out of your schedule. It's now probably, what, 2:30 in Atlanta? Is that where you are?
That is correct. And thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity.
And if you would like, you're certainly welcome to join us for the remainder of today's meeting in case any questions should come up. Otherwise, board staff will follow up with you to get any additional information we require.
I would love to stay around if that's okay.
That'd be wonderful. Thank you so much for doing that. Okay, so moving on. We are going to go to item number 6, which is a historical overview of SIPAC from the board's point of view. And I believe we're going to start out with our Assistant Executive Officer, Mr. Burke. Is that correct, Mr. Burke?
That is correct.
Okay, so could you take us through that history?
Absolutely. What I'll do now is I'll briefly discuss what telehealth law as it exists in California, then provide the history of the board's and the committee's previous discussions and decisions regarding the interjurisdictional telepsychology compact. After which, just to give full context to what we've already been discussing, I will read the letter that was sent to ASPPB by the board regarding the SIPAC from January 2015. Okay, so existing California law, it requires valid licensure to provide telehealth services to California residents. Telehealth includes live, interactive, store and forward technologies. Patients' verbal consent must be obtained prior to delivery of telehealth services and documented in the patient's medical record. Failure to obtain patient consent in advance constitutes unprofessional conduct. Also allows any person who is licensed as a psychologist at the doctoral level in another state or territory of the United States or in Canada to provide psychological services in California for a period not to exceed 30 days in any calendar year. Telehealth is defined as the mode of delivering healthcare services and public health via information and communication technologies to facilitate the diagnosis, consultation, treatment, education, care management, and self-management of a patient's healthcare while the patient is at the originating site and the healthcare provider is at the distant site. It also requires the healthcare provider to verbally inform the patient that telehealth may be used, obtain verbal or written consent from the patient for this use, and requires the consent to be documented. It establishes that failure to inform the patient that telehealth may be used and to obtain their informed consent can constitute unprofessional conduct. It also states that all laws regarding the confidentiality of healthcare information and a patient's rights to his or her medical information apply to telehealth interactions. And now the sort of background to the board's and the committee's historic interactions with SciPact. The board formed the Telepsychology Committee at its November 2014 meeting to discuss and analyze the contents and requirements of the proposed SciPact. The committee met on December 16, 2014 and reported its findings to the full board at its January 2015 meeting. A number of concerns were raised by the committee, and these concerns were reported to ASPPB in a letter dated January 22nd, 2015. Now, as requested by the committee chair, I'll read the letter that was sent in January 2015 by the board, signed by the then board president, Dr. Michael Erickson. The California Board of Psychology formed a telepsychology committee to discuss and analyze the interjurisdictional telepsychology compact put forward by the Association of State and Provincial Psychology Boards. The committee presented its opinions on the compact at the January 9th board meeting. The board would like to commend ASPPB for the time and effort that went into the generation of the proposed compact. The board agrees with ASPPB that it is important to increase license portability and consumer access to psychological services. However, the board's review raised a number of fundamental concerns which are outlined below. Article 9 addresses the creation of the Interjurisdictional Telepsychology Compact Commission. The compact states would pay the operations of the commission via as yet unspecified fees through a currently unspecified formula. There will be costs associated with reporting to a database and additional administrative costs to the board, while all fees paid by licensees and state contributions to the administration of the commission under the proposed scheme will go to ASPPB and the commission. In other words, the board takes up additional burdens and costs while all of the fees go elsewhere. Next bullet. The commission would also have the ability to promulgate regulations which would have the force of law in compact states. Next bullet. Article 10 of the compact grants the commission to grant emergency rules. The definition and implementation of the clause is vague and is another example of the extraordinary regulatory authority ceded to the Commission by compact states. Next bullet. Article 13 of the compact addresses the coordinated licensure information exchange. States would be forced to rely on a complex national database for licensing, complaint, and discipline information exchange. The system, which is not yet developed, would be owned and operated by a non-governmental agency. It is unclear at this time who will be the administrator of the database. Next bullet. The current compact language does not require any continuing education of home state licensees. The e-passport has a 6-hour requirement once a renewal cycle, 2 years. Licensees from jurisdictions that do not require CE, e.g. New York, would be able to practice on California consumers with only 3 hours of CE per year in the area of technology and psychological practice. Final bullet. That the compact would also place responsibilities on the board to report information regarding our licensees and possibly even complaints which may currently be classified as confidential under our existing statutory and regulatory scheme. This would alter some protections afforded to licensees and complainants, with little knowledge on our part as to the safeguards for confidential information undertaken by other compact states. This would need to be addressed in advance of a recommendation to the legislature regarding joining the compact. Since reporting can be required in advance of resolution of a complaint in some instances, the committee believes this requires further clarification. The board recognizes the need for statutes and regulations that address the issue of telepsychology. However, it is the board's opinion that the compact unnecessarily cedes too much regulatory authority and licensing information to non-governmental out-of-state entities. The board looks forward to exploring other interjurisdictional telepsychology possibilities, but will not seek to join the compact at this time. Sincerely signed, Dr. Michael Erickson, President, Board of Psychology. Thank you very much. That's the some history and background regarding this issue.
I would like to add on a little bit of additional information. Thank you very much, Mr. Burke. And that is that in 2013, we were contacted by ASPPB at the time as they were contemplating creating SciPact to ask us about what our state would prefer in terms of credentialing under the SciPact system, whether that be APA accreditation, regional accreditation, et cetera. And our response at that time was regional accreditation. That was the preference of the California board. That regionally accredited people should be eligible for SciPact, or at least that was our preference as a state. Subsequently, when we received the model compact language, which did not include the criteria for receipt of the e-passport or the temporary practice certificate, the actual language of the model statute spoke about regional accreditation. So we were under the impression at that time that regional accreditation was no longer an issue, that people that went to regionally accredited schools would be eligible for the e-passport or the temporary practice certificate. In light of that fact, when we wrote the letter in 2015, January of 2015, outlining our concerns relative to the compact, we were not particularly focused on that issue because we thought the issue had been resolved already. At the time, sitting on the board was Dr. Andrew Harlem, who is a faculty member at a regionally accredited graduate school. So we didn't hone in on that particular issue, and we very much appreciate the fact that licensees and institutions have, again, raised this issue, given that there is, I won't say a discrepancy, but a disconnect between what the compact provides for and what the actual e-passport criteria provide for. So we wanted to make sure that people knew we were tracking this at one point, but we thought that it had been resolved. And I will add at this point that we got no particular response to our January 22nd, 2015 letter. I assume that ASPPB looked at that as just feedback. Those issues, from our point of view, were never addressed. The board made a decision not to proceed with any kind of legislative initiative to become a member of SciPact because of these outstanding concerns. And in more recent years, stakeholders, including the California Psychological Association, I think based on the initial feedback they were getting from some of their members, were interested in knowing whether we were going to proceed with SciPact again. Having had the issue pass for a while, and I will add, CPA had not taken a position on the compact. They were just interested in seeing additional information and having additional consideration of it by the board. So having said all of that, we then decided during this past year, given the amount of interest in SciPact, that we would again reopen the topic through the Telepsychology Committee, who would subsequently be making recommendations to the board. So that's where we stand at this point. And we're very cognizant of many of the concerns that were addressed in the various letters and in the public comment we've received up until this point. We are also very cognizant that for those of us that are licensed board members who might belong to listservs, we're certainly aware of the discussions that have been occurring on listservs regarding this particular topic. I know that there are some psychologists in California that are interested in becoming members of SciPact, typically they have highly interjurisdictional practices, and they are often have to go through the process of being licensed in several different states to be able to practice interjurisdictionally within the scope of their particular practice. Okay, with those things in mind, and prior to opening this all up, I think we've identified the outstanding issues we have. Is there anything we need to add, Mr. Burke, to this particular portion of the agenda item number 6?
I don't have anything to add other than what you already just said regarding the history from 2013 2014.
Okay, and Ms. Rivera will be talking about the staff analysis of SIPACT in agenda item number 7, if I understand correctly.
Yes.
Okay, so do we have any questions from board members that they'd like to ask Mr. Burke or myself?
Hi, this is Julie Nystrom. One of the questions that I have is just with the increase of mental health needs in California seems to be increasing significantly. How well are we able to address those needs if we don't join SIPAC? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does make sense. I don't think we know. I don't think we know how access to care is really going to be impacted. Assumedly, there will be practitioners from other states that would like to provide services in California through SIPACT. So whether there will be an appreciable bump up in the availability of mental health services in the state, not entirely clear at this point. I mean, it would be speculation, at least on my part. And, one of the concerns that we had expressed in the letter, as recently outlined by Mr. Burke, we would be opening up California consumers to be receiving services from practitioners in other states who have different requirements for maintaining their license. I do believe New York now does require continuing education hours. The number of hours and the depth of the hours required and the particular subjects that need to be considered isn't entirely clear. So one of our misgivings in the inception of this was that we were kind of opening it up to people that hadn't necessarily met some of the standards that we have for purposes of protection of consumers in California, including our continuing education hours. So we'd be flying a little blind in terms of what practitioners would want to, from other states, would want to perform telehealth services in California. Our state does have approximately 20% of the psychologists in the country. And I think if my calculations are correct, I don't believe we have 20% of the population. I think we have actually a higher concentration of psychologists and other mental health professionals in California than many other states do. But to be perfectly honest, Ms. Nystrom, I have no idea. Perhaps staff has some thoughts on this topic.
This is Antoinette. I just want to briefly address, this may be kind of tangentially connected to the question, but just to address two opportunities to provide telehealth in California for those in other states that have a license. One is our temporary practice provision, which does allow 30 days of practice in a calendar year. And through our sunset, we're hoping to clarify that that is non-consecutive days. The other option is if someone has applied for licensure and is waiting to meet the requirements to take the exam or submit the supervision requirements, we do allow for 6 months of temporary practice. So I don't know if that directly addresses the question, but I do want to offer that up as kind of two other options, which would allow for some kind of out-of-state practitioner to provide telehealth in California. And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you both for your response. I appreciate it.
Okay. Any further questions from you, Ms. Nystrom, or from Dr. Tate?
None for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
None for me either. Thank you.
Okay. Hearing none, why don't we open up the Q&A box again to determine the number of people who would like to make public comment on this historical information as to SIPAC.
All right, this is a moderator and I have opened up the Q&A panel. If anyone would like to comment on this agenda item, please type. I would like to make a comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions for your reference. This is the moderator, and at this time I see no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, if you would, please.
Okay.
And we're now going to move to item number 7, which is a review of SIPAC as conducted by board staff with input from board members. Just for purposes of your planning today, for the folks that are listening today and participating, at approximately 12:15, we are going to break for a 1-hour lunch, which is a very liberal lunch for us these days. Typically, we take a half an hour, 45 minutes, but based on staff needs and board needs, we will be taking a 1-hour break from approximately 12:15 to 1:15. So the next portion of this is a review of the possible action on SIPAC model legislation and the analysis conducted by staff. Ms. Rivera, I believe you are going to lead us through this.
Yes, thank you. Can you guys hear me?
It's very faint.
How's that?
Better.
Okay, here we go. The mission of the Board of Psychology is to protect consumers of psychological services by licensing psychologists, regulating the practice of psychology, and supporting the evolution of the profession. As such, the board supports strategies that encourage innovation and access to care. The COVID-19 pandemic has changed the way healthcare professionals have had to adapt to using technological means to treat their patients. The inability to see a patient in person has led to the widespread use of computer-based methods of providing healthcare services. Notwithstanding the COVID-19 pandemic, the advent of telemedicine or telehealth has made it possible for doctors and medical professionals to provide medical services to their regular patients and to those who may have had difficulty in reaching a medical office. The U.S. Constitution grants states the right to enter into multi-state agreements for their common benefit. Congress must approve any compact that would increase the state's political power in a manner that would encroach upon the federal government's power. When entering compacts, states must adhere to state constitutional requirements, particularly regarding separation of powers, delegation of power, and debt limitations. In 1951, the Supreme Court affirmed in West Virginia v. Sims that states have the authority to enter compacts and to delegate authority to an interstate agency. There are currently more than 200 active interstate compacts. 22 of them are national in scope, including several with 35 or more member states, and an independent commission to administer the agreement. More than 30 compacts are regional, with 8 or more member states. For information about existing compacts, please visit www.csg.org. Currently, there are several professions utilizing interstate compacts to address regulatory matters, and each profession has taken a different approach when writing its compact language. 2 examples involve the professions of medicine and nursing. Medicine chose to construct its compact to address expedited licensure, while nursing's compact creates a multi-state license. Like most healthcare professions in the U.S., licensure in psychology is based on state licensing laws and systems for identifying and credentialing competent psychologists and regulating their professional conduct once licensed. Because licensure requirements for psychologists vary significantly across the various states and territories, and change within a state over time, obtaining a license to practice in multiple states or in subsequent states years after graduate training has ended can be a complicated, tedious, and cumbersome process for a psychologist. The ASPBB realized early on the need for a mechanism for expedited licensure. ASPBB is the consortium or alliance of the statutorily created state psychology licensing boards of all 50 states, the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, and Guam, as well as 10 Canadian provinces. At this time, one must be licensed in each state in order to offer psychological services in that state. This requirement makes the possibility of offering psychological services via telepsychology across state lines impractical. Requiring a psychologist to obtain licensure in every state where a client and a psychologist may make contact represents a significant barrier to the feasibility of telepsychology and temporary in-person face-to-face practice, and increases the complications and redundancies of the licensure process for qualified psychologists. ASPBB's arguments for SIPACT. SIPACT seeks to address the following issues: state licensure, eligibility, and consistencies. Different states use different criteria for licensure eligibility, particularly in the areas of academic education and supervised work experience. These inconsistencies in criteria restrict licensure by endorsement between the states, and that states often do not accept each other's licensees when psychologists seek licensure in a state with differing requirements from where they first became licensed. Differences in state licensure evaluation procedures. Each state psychology licensing board, as part of its duty to protect the public, has traditionally found it necessary to review and accept candidates for licensure based only on its own evaluation of credentials. These evaluations may result in different outcomes of similar applications based on different legislative or regulatory requirements or different understandings of acceptable criteria. Differences in state licensure application processes. Each psychology licensing board has its own unique licensure application and procedures. Each time a psychologist applies for licensure to a state, they must complete a different application. This is inefficient licensure application method can result in the unnecessary drain of scarce resources and duplicative efforts in the licensure process. Issues in disciplining psychologists. Disciplinary procedures and rules vary from state to state. The current solution is to require psychologists to be licensed in all states where they and the client are located, no matter the delivery method. This is untenable to both psychologists and the public. Differences in state disciplinary processes. To protect the public from harm, state psychology licensing boards are empowered to utilize disciplinary processes and procedures to investigate public complaints against psychologists. Since licensing laws are state-specific, the laws enabling those powers vary from state to state. Due to these differences, a mechanism is needed to give the state psychology licensing boards power to discipline, where none currently exists, in order to ensure public protection. Differences in state statutes and regulations. As seen with both licensure requirements and disciplinary procedures, state psychology licensing boards, statutes, and regulations pertaining to the practice of psychology also vary from state to state. These differences make it very difficult for psychologists to know what standard to apply when practicing telepsychology, and make the practice of telepsychology across jurisdiction boundaries complicated to negotiate. SIPACT also seeks to address compact administration and enforcement, data sharing, and finances. SIPACT establishes an independent operating authority, the Psychology Interjurisdictional Compact Commission, to administer and enforce the compact and to address future issues surrounding telepsychology and temporary in-person face-to-face practice as needed. Creating consistencies among temporary in-person face-to-face practice requirements and practice time allowances are needed to relieve the confusion around all variations among the states. SIPACT not only addresses telepsychology, it addresses the inconsistencies regarding temporary in-person face-to-face practice by further developing the interjurisdictional practice certificate. SIPACT seeks to reduce existing licensure barriers to psychologists using advanced telecommunication technologies to deliver psychological services across state lines and to create consistency around the requirements regarding temporary in-person face-to-face practice while maintaining state sovereignty over licensure matters. The status of the SIPACT. SIPACT became fully operational in July of 2020. Psychologists can now apply for the authorization to practice telepsychology, the APIT, and temporary authorization to practice, which are required to practice telepsychology and or temporary in-person face-to-face practice in SIPACT states. States that have enacted SIPACT legislation include Arizona, Colorado, Delaware, District of Columbia, Georgia, Illinois, Missouri, Nebraska, Nevada, New Hampshire, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, Texas, Utah, and Virginia. Alabama and Kentucky will become effective in June of 2021. States that have pending SIPAC legislation: Connecticut, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Maryland, Minnesota, New Jersey, New Mexico, Ohio, Rhode Island, South Carolina, Tennessee, Washington. States that currently have telehealth, telepsychology statutes and or regulations include Arizona, California, Delaware, Georgia, Idaho, Kentucky, New Hampshire, Ohio, Oklahoma, Texas, and Vermont. States that currently specifically include telepsychology in the definition of the practice of psychology include California, Florida, Georgia, Kansas, Kentucky, Mississippi, Montana, New Hampshire, North Dakota, Ohio, South Carolina, Vermont, Utah, and Wisconsin. States that currently have telehealth coverage mandate include Arizona, California, Colorado, Georgia, Hawaii, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, only for Medicaid, Mississippi, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, only for Medicaid, New Hampshire, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Oregon, Texas, Vermont, and Virginia. States that currently provide a temporary guest practice provision include all states except Arkansas and Connecticut. Now we move to the model legislation. Article 1, purpose and objectives of the compact. Increase public access to professional psychological services by allowing for telepsychological practice across state lines, as well as temporary in-person face-to-face services into a state which the psychologist is not licensed to practice psychology. 2, enhance the state's ability to protect the public's health and safety, especially client-patient safety. 3, encourage the cooperation of compact states in the areas of psychology licensure and regulation. 4, facilitate the exchange of information between compact states regarding psychologist licensure, adverse actions, and disciplinary history. 5, promote compliance with the laws governing psychological practice in each compact state. And 6, invest all compact states with the authority to hold licensed psychologists accountable through the mutual recognition of compact state licenses. Article 2, definitions of terms used in the compact. Items of note include ASPPB.
Ms. Rivera?
Yes.
In the interest of your voice, we can always skip Article 2, and if people have specific questions about it, they can ask them later.
Sounds good. Article 3, home state licensure. The home state is a state in which the psychologist is physically located and where the services are delivered as authorized by the authority to practice interjurisdictional psychology. A home state's license authorizes a psychologist to practice in a receiving state under the authority to practice interjurisdictional telepsychology only if the compact state currently requires the psychologist to hold an active e-passport, has a mechanism in place for receiving and investigating complaints about licensed individuals, notifies the Commission in compliance with the terms herein of any adverse action or significant investigatory information regarding a licensed individual, requires an identity history summary of all applicants at initial licensure, including the use of the results of fingerprints or other biometric data checks compliant with the requirements of the FBI or other designee with similar authority no later than 10 years after activation of the compact, and complies with the bylaws and rules of the Commission. A home state's license grants temporary authorization to practice to a psychologist in a distant state only if the compact state abides by the aforementioned criteria. Article 4, compact privilege to practice telepsychology. This section lists the requirements necessary for a psychologist to practice in a compact state. These requirements include a graduate degree in psychology from an accredited institution, possession of a current full unrestricted license to practice psychology in a home state that is a compact state, have no history of adverse action, have no criminal record, possess a current active e-passport, and provide attestations certifying area of intended practice, and knowledge and adherence to legal requirements in the home and receiving states. Article 5, compact temporary authorization to practice requirements. These are the same as those listed in Article 4. Article 6, conditions of telepsychology practice in a receiving state. A psychologist may practice in a receiving state only in the performance of the scope of practice for psychology as assigned by an appropriate state psychology regulatory authority. The psychologist must initiate a client-patient contract in a home state via telecommunications technologies with a client-patient in a receiving state. Article 7, adverse actions. In the event an adverse action must be taken against a psychologist, a home state has the discretion to impose an action against a psychologist from that home state. As it pertains to a distant state, it can take adverse action on a psychologist's temporary authorization to practice within that distant state. Additionally, a receiving state has the authority to take an adverse action on a psychologist's authority to practice interjurisdictional telepsychology within that receiving state. A home state psychology regulatory authority, such as the Board of Psychology, will be responsible for investigating and taking appropriate action with respect to reported inappropriate conduct engaged in by a licensee, which occurred in a receiving state if such conduct had occurred by a licensee within the home state. In such cases, the home state's law will determine any adverse action against a psychologist's license. Article 8, additional authorities invested in a compact state psychology regulatory authority. Under the PSYPACT, a compact state psychology regulatory authority will be able to issue subpoenas for hearings and investigations which require the attendance and testimony of witnesses and the production of evidence. Subpoenas issued by a compact state psychology regulatory authority for attendance and testimony of witnesses and or the production of evidence from another compact state shall be enforced in the latter state by any court of competent jurisdiction, according to that court's practice and procedure in considering subpoenas issued in its own proceedings. The issuing state psychology regulatory authority shall pay any witness fees, travel expenses, mileage, and other fees required by the service statutes of the state where the witnesses and or evidence are located. This is an expense where we do not currently have listed in our budget and would be difficult to quantify. The compact state psychology regulatory authority can also issue cease and desist and or injunctive relief orders to invoke a psychologist's authority to practice, to revoke a psychologist's authority to practice interjurisdictional telepsychology and or temporary authorization to practice. While an investigation is underway, a psychologist may not change their home state licensure. A home state psychology regulatory authority is authorized to complete any pending investigations of a psychologist and to take any actions appropriate under its law. Once the investigation is complete, the home state psychology regulatory authority shall promptly report the conclusions of the investigations to the commission. The psychologist may change his or her home state licensure once an investigation has been completed. The commission shall promptly notify the new home state of any such decisions as provided in the rules of the commission. All information provided to the commission or distributed by compact states pursuant to the psychologist shall be confidential, filed under seal, and used for investigatory or disciplinary matters. Article 9, Coordinated Licensure Information System. The Coordinated Database, or PSYPACT directory, has been created and is live. PSYPACT language notes that the states will provide a uniform data set. Currently, in order to meet this requirement, the Commission will need access to states' licensure data and for disciplinary data to be entered into the ASPBB disciplinary data system, which is currently being done by board staff. The goal of this section is to ensure that any information needed regarding the application processes associated with the issuance of authorizations under PSYPACT is shared among the compact states. The data in the system includes the following: identifying information, licensure data, significant investigatory information, adverse actions against a psychologist's license, an indicator that a psychologist's authority to practice interjurisdictional telepsychology and or temporary authorization to practice is revoked, non-confidential information related to alternative program participation information, any denial of application for licensure, and the reasons for such denial, and other information which may facilitate the administration of this compact as determined by the rules of the Commission. Compact states reporting information to the coordinated database may designate information that may not be shared with the public without the express permission of the compact state reporting the information. Any information submitted to the coordinated database that is subsequently required to be expunged by the law of the compact state reporting the information shall be removed from the coordinated database. Article 10. Establishment of the Psychology Interjurisdictional Compact Commission. In order to administer the PSYPACT, the compact states created and established a joint public agency known as the Psychology Interjurisdictional Compact Commission. The commission serves to provide a mechanism for solving interstate matters and meets once a year. Each compact state has one vote. The voting member serves as the state's commissioner. The State Psychology Regulatory Authority appoints its delegate who can act on behalf of its compact state. The delegate must be the executive director or executive secretary, a current member of the State Psychology Regulatory Authority of a compact state, or a designee empowered with the appropriate delegate authority to act on behalf of each state. Each commissioner is entitled to one vote. All meetings are open to the public and should be noticed accordingly. Rules and bylaws are created and voted upon by the commission. The bylaws must be published and provided to each compact state. The commission has a number of powers. They include to purchase and maintain insurance and bonds, to borrow, accept, or contract for services of personnel, including but not limited to employees of a compact state, to establish a budget and make expenditures, to borrow money, to provide and receive information from, and to cooperate with law enforcement agencies. The executive board is comprised of 6 members. 5 voting members are elected from the current membership of the commission, and 1 member is an ex officio non-voting member from the recognized membership organization composed of state and provincial psychology regulatory authorities. The executive board meets annually and has a number of duties. They recommend changes to the rules or bylaws, changes to compact legislation, fees paid by compact states such as annual dues, and any other applicable fees. They also prepare and recommend the budget and maintain financial records for the commission. Commission is financed through an annual assessment paid by each compact state. Based upon the revenue assumptions in the SIPAC 2021 annual budget and narrative report, if California were to join SIPAC, the board would be expected to pay an annual assessment of approximately $3,765.92. This is based on the following formula. Total number of licensees, 23,537, multiplied by 1%. This number, 235.37, is then multiplied by $40. This figure, 9,414.80, is then multiplied by 40%. The result is the aforementioned $3,765.92. Additionally, the Commission and ASPPB have entered into a memorandum of understanding. This MOU covers the costs associated with staffing, professional fees such as the contract with the Council of State Governments, directors and officers, insurance, travel costs for the Commission, office space and utilities, use of computers, telephone, internet, and other office equipment and services. Article 11, rulemaking. Commission rules are limited to compact administration and do not constitute new rules for the state regulatory authority as to its state responsibilities. The rules of SIPAC would only supersede any state law pertaining to the interjurisdictional practice of telepsychology and temporary in-person face-to-face practice pursuant to the compact. Article 12, oversight dispute resolution.
You could stop there, actually. I don't think we need to leave this. What I'm going to suggest at this point, particularly in interests of Ms. Rivera, given that lengthy recitation, which was very much appreciated, we're now going to take our break. It is actually 12:11, if I can trust the time on my computer. We will reconvene at 1:11 p.m. So we are now in lunch recess, and we'll reconvene at 1:11 p.m. Thank you very much. Well, I see we've now reached 1:12 p.m., a minute past when we said we were going to reconvene. Just for purposes of making sure that all of the board members are back and present, Ms. Proto, could you please call the roll?
Yes.
Thank
Nystrom.
you.
Excuse me, Nystrom.
Here, thank you.
Phillips.
Here.
Tate.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, well, quorum being present, we will continue. And now we're going to return to Ms. Rivera and her patient reading of the materials that she prepared for us for today's meeting.
Excellent. I'm here. Let's see. Where did we leave off? Article 12, oversight, dispute resolution, and enforcement.
You can actually just go directly. You can skip
Items.
12, 13, and 14.
Okay.
Cool.
We will go to items for consideration. Since board staff has last reviewed the SIPAC in 2015, much has changed. When staff first reviewed the SIPAC, much of it was conceptual and many of the details had not been determined. Since then, the compact has been finalized and became effective in July of 2020. The board previously expressed concerns regarding the following issues: payment of fees for operations of the SIPAC, the promulgation of regulations by the commission, which would have the force of law in compact states, the coordinated national licensure database, the lack of continuing education requirements, and confidentiality issues. Most of the concerns listed in the initial analysis of the compact have been addressed in some fashion. However, concerns remain. The formula for fees to be paid has been determined, as outlined previously, and assessments will be calculated in December of 2021 and invoiced in January 2022. This year, 2021, will be the first full year of SIPAC program implementation. Per the MOU between ASPPB and the Commission, ASPPB will continue to assume most of the operating expenses and will thus receive 40% of the fees collected for providing services per the agreement. Payment of assessment fees will commence in early 2022. The formula to determine the assessment for each member state is based on the number of licensees within a state. For California, the assessment fee would be approximately $3,765.92. The promulgation of regulations by the Commission would occur based on a vote made by the Commission and its member states. If California were to join SIPAC, it would get one vote regardless of the number of licensees. The Coordinated National Licensure Database is live. SIPAC staff currently pulls data from the State Board of Psychology websites. However, board staff would be expected to enter any disciplinary data into the ASPPB disciplinary data system. SIPAC Commission staff functions as the administrator of the Coordinated Licensure Database. The lack of continuing education requirements remains a concern. In order to obtain an e-passport to practice telepsychology under the authority of SIPAC, a licensee only needs 3 hours of continuing education training in technology. Per SIPAC staff, all continuing education must be directly relevant to the practice of telepsychology and would include, but not be restricted to, any one of the following areas as defined in the APA, ASPPB, APAIT telepsychology guidelines. Competence of the psychologist, standards of care in the delivery of telepsychology services, informed consent, confidentiality of data and information, security and transmission of data and information, disposal of data and information and technologies, testing and assessment when providing telepsychology services, interjurisdictional practice. When staff and the board first reviewed the SIPAC in 2015, the e-passport had a 6-hour continuing education requirement, technology and psychological practice, once a renewal cycle, which is every 2 years. Per Article 8, Section 3 of the model legislation, a home state psychology regulatory authority is authorized to complete any pending investigations of a psychologist and to take any actions appropriate under its law. The home state psychology regulatory authority shall promptly report the conclusions of such investigations to the Commission. Once an investigation has been completed and pending the outcome of said investigation, the psychologist may change his or her home state licensure. The Commission shall promptly notify the new home state of any such decisions as provided in the rules of the Commission. All information provided to the Commission or distributed by the Commission, the compact states pursuant to the psychologist, shall be confidential, filed under seal, and used for investigatory or disciplinary matters. Per Article 4, a graduate degree in psychology is required in order to practice under SIPAC. In order to be licensed in California, a psychologist must hold a doctoral degree. Per ASPPB, SIPAC does not impact a state's right or ability to issue a license. It is applicable to the interjurisdictional practice of telepsychology and temporary in-person, face-to-face practice, and only takes precedence over state laws regarding this type of interjurisdictional practice. For example, any licensed psychologist must obtain an e-passport to practice telepsychology under the authority of SIPAC and must have 3 hours of continuing education in technology as required by the e-passport. Should a SIPAC state not require continuing education, this requirement of SIPAC would supersede the state's authority. Article 5, page 20 and 21 of the compact would potentially deprive some California psychologists of the ability to perform interjurisdictional psychology if they graduated from a California-approved school. Article 5 of the compact reads, in part, hold a graduate degree in psychology from an institute of higher education that was, at the time of the degree was awarded, regionally accredited by an accrediting body recognized by the U.S. Department of Education to grant graduate degrees, or authorized by provincial statute of Royal Charter to grant doctoral degrees. Section 2914 of the Business and Professions Code requires each applicant for licensure to possess an earned doctorate degree in psychology, in educational psychology, or in education with this field of specialization in counseling psychology or educational psychology from a college or institution of higher education that is accredited by a regional accrediting agency recognized by the United States Department of Education. The model presumes and requires the board to recognize the e-passport. Joining SIPAC requires legislative involvement and concurrence by each state whenever a change in compact language is necessary. Similar compacts have been initiated in other practice areas such as nursing. California is not part of the 33 participating states in the compact for boards of registered nursing. In 2020, Senator Morlock introduced legislation to enact the nursing licensure compact under the BRN. The Board of Nursing, along with the California Nurses Association, opposed that bill. This year, Assemblymember Fong introduced AB 410, and it is currently going through the legislative committee process. The language of this bill is the same as SB 1053. Board staff has spoken with BRN staff to gather information regarding the nursing compact and their concerns. CNA cited the following reasons for opposing SB 1053. Joining the NLC would inhibit the state's ability to protect consumers from harm. It would decrease pathways to licensure, and it would diminish the state's ability to set high standards for safety and care. The Psychology Interjurisdictional Compact Commission, the governing body for SIPACT, is composed of one representative from each compact state. The commission provides oversight of SIPACT as well as creates and enforces rules governing the operation of SIPACT. Each compact state has one vote. The commission will serve to provide a mechanism to solve interstate matters. Currently, our board's enforcement division receives, processes, and investigates all disciplinary complaints. Joining the SIPACT could potentially increase enforcement's workload, as out-of-state licensees who hold an e-passport could potentially provide psychological services to California consumers, thus increasing the number of licensees the enforcement division would have to monitor. As it pertains to fiscal considerations, the board would be expected to pay an annual assessment to the SIPACT Commission. Given the board's current fiscal condition, paying an annual assessment could prove unwise. E-passport. The compact will only be possible between states that recognize the e-passport. The e-passport will allow licensees who are eligible to qualify to practice telepsychology on patients in other states that recognize the e-passport. As discussed earlier, the e-passport means a certificate issued by the Association of State and Provincial Psychology Boards that promotes the standardization and the criteria of interjurisdictional telepsychology practice and facilitates the process for licensed psychologists to provide telepsychological services across state lines. E-passport is a credential vetted and issued by ASPBB granting authorization to practice interjurisdictional telepsychology in a receiving state where the psychologist with this credential is not currently licensed. A psychologist must be licensed at the doctoral level to qualify for the e-passport. Given the considerations listed above, board staff recommends the board not join SIPACT at this time. That concludes the analysis. Do we want to look at the model legislation?
Hi, Dr. Phillips. This is Jason. You may be muted.
I'm sorry about that. Boy, I've been very talkative at this end and nobody's heard a damn thing I said. Okay, so what I was saying was we do not need to go through the model legislation. It's there for those who would like to read it. But I'm aware that Mr. McGuire has some questions regarding the model legislation that he would like to ask Ms. Orwig. Is that your desire, Mr. McGuire?
Oh, well, no, actually, Dr. Phillips, I asked my questions of Ms. Orwig at the last item, but I did have two additional just notes for the committee's consideration, just comments, I guess, on the model legislation that I just wanted to share. It kind of piggybacks on staff's recommendation and adds to that. And
certainly. Why don't you go ahead?
Sure, I'll be very brief. There's just two. On page 80 of the materials, the original materials, not the hand carry, this is actually within the model legislation, but it describes that SIPACT's commission has the right to pursue legal action against a compact state to, quote, enforce compliance with the compact. So just flagging that, not to anticipate if we were to join that we would be out of compliance, but you never know. So joining this compact could subject the board to that increased risk of liability for litigation. And then secondarily, if for whatever reason the board at some point thought it was the best idea to withdraw from the compact in the future, should it join in the first place, I just wanted to note that pursuant to the model legislation, we have to get the legislature to, of course, enact a repealing statute. And even then, by the terms of the model legislation, the withdrawal shall not take effect until 6 months after that enactment. So I just wanted to add those two pieces for the committee's consideration.
That's great additional information. I appreciate it. And I will also say, just as a point of clarification, that we have established that the e-passport would require that people be graduating from an APA credentialed program. So the memo was drafted in anticipation of today's meeting. We clarified some of this material after the fact and certainly established that the concerns that have been put forward by stakeholders were consonant with the criteria for eligibility under the e-passport or under the temporary practice certificate. I think I want to try to do this in an order that makes sense. I want to first put this out here for board members to discuss a little bit or to ask any additional questions they might have of staff. I would then like to give Ms. Orwig a brief moment to respond, and then we'll open this up for public comment to hear any additional comment we have from, I'm going to do that all before we make any decision as to whether a motion should be brought or whether a motion is going to be heard today. We'd initially anticipated that this would be a somewhat lengthier process. So thankfully, we've been able to move fairly expeditiously. In the light of that fact, I want to make sure that there's ample time for stakeholder feedback and for board members to feel comfortable with the decision. So right now, I'll just put it out there for questions and comments from board members. Anything?
This is Leah Tate. I have no questions or comments. I think it's outlined helpful, and I think the presentation was very helpful. Thank you.
Good, thanks. Ms. Nystrom?
I agree with what Dr. Tate said. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, so Ms. Orwig, would it be your preference to respond now, or would you want to wait to hear what the public comments are?
If possible, hearing what the public comments are, and then maybe I can address everything at one time.
Okay, that'd be great. Okay, thanks for letting me know. Why don't we open the Q&A box for anyone that would like to make public comment on this? Once we've determined the number of comments that are going to be made, we'll allocate time accordingly.
All right, this is the moderator, and I've opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment on this agenda item, please type "I would like to make a comment" using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions, and we'll give you a moment. All right, this is the moderator, and at this time we have 3 members of the public that would like to make a comment.
Okay, why don't we provide each of them with 3 minutes each?
All right, so our first member of the public that would like to speak is Dr. Linder Crow, and I will let you know when you've been unmuted. All right, Dr. Linder Crow, you've been unmuted. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you so much. Joe Linder Crow with the California Psychological Association. I just wanted to go back one more time. I still think there is some confusion. Ms. Orwig, if you could maybe just go back one more time and clarify for us, when was the change made to the e-passport requirements that added the requirement to have graduated from an APA accredited program? And the second part of that question is, I want to also be very clear that if there were to be a modification, am I correct in thinking that the modification then would need to be in the e-passport rather than in the commission's rules? Am I right about that?
Ms. Orwig, if you'd like to respond now, you can.
Okay. Yes, that is correct. The e-passport qualifications are actually in the ASPPB certificate. They do not appear in the SIPAC Commission rules or their policies. The change to the e-passport actually really was not a change. When we were presenting this, we had said this is what we think the e-passport is going to be, but we also were very clear to say we did not know what it would be until the commission got established. We did that as part of why we also did not open applications until after the commission had been established and we had all of those criteria in. So when the ASPPB made that decision, I think in February of 2020, to add that requirement, that is really the first time the e-passport qualifications had been officially approved, and then they were vetted with the SIPAC Commission. So that would have said, when you were asking, I think that they were set in about February of 2020. But prior to that, when we were presenting through from 2015 on, we were saying this is what we think it's going to have, but until the commission is firmly set and the final criteria are made, that is subject to change, and that is why we did not open up any applications prior to that being finalized.
Okay, and again, if there were changes, I also want to clarify, you said the executive board is going to meet in May. Which executive board is going to meet in May?
The SIPAC Commission Executive Board. They meet on May 26th. And
Okay.
Information and links to that website or to that meeting can be found on the SIPAC.org website.
Okay, and again, just to be clear, if it's the e-passport that would need to be modified, that would not be something the commission could do. That would have to be done by the ASPPB board. Is that right?
That is correct, but the two actually have worked very well together and have,
Okay.
we brought concerns to ASPPB. ASPPB has brought concerns to the SIPAC Commission. So we do
thank you.
realize that we need to work together.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, our next public comment is from Melody Schaefer. Melody, I'll let you know when you've been unmuted. And Melody, you're unmuted. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Ms. Orrig, I'm a little confused, and maybe you can help clarify this. In looking at the SciBook on your website for ASPPB and looking at all the states' criteria that you have listed for licensure, along the criteria for having an APA or CPA accredited doctoral program, there are only 8 states listed that have that criteria. However, it appears that all the states have the criteria for regional accreditation as a criteria for your site, for licensure within state, rather. Could you explain again what would be the purpose of limiting the SciPac to only those students with APA accredited doctoral program training?
Thank you for the question. The SciBook data that you're looking at, the 8 states that are listed are the states that absolutely require APA accreditation, I believe. And so those are that there is the majority of them, or the rest of them, do accept it. They may not require it. We are in the process of finalizing a document called ASPPB in Focus that will dive down even further into this information, and hopefully we'll be releasing information about that next week. And so there should be some additional information diving down into the licensing requirements by each of the states in that document.
All right, the next comment is from Dr. Gregory Gormanis. So Dr. Gregory, I'll let you know you've been unmuted. All right, you've been unmuted.
Thank you all. I want to first thank Ms. Rivera. First, I'm Greg Gormanis from the state of Louisiana. I'm a licensing board member here, and my comments represent only my position. But I want to thank Ms. Rivera for the invitation to attend as a non-SciPac participating state to provide input during your meeting, and also to thank her for taking my call during her lunch break to clarify Louisiana's role today. In addition to what's been mentioned, SciPac disenfranchising health service psychologists who did not graduate from APA accredited doctoral programs, my question addresses another category of potentially disenfranchised licensees, and that is general applied psychologists, GAPs, which includes industrial organizational psychologists. And Janet Orwig, as you know, I've raised this issue about GAPs and industrial organizational at every mid-year and annual meeting of ASBBB since the 80s. This is something that really needs to be addressed, but it broadens the issue because my understanding is California is still a licensed industrial organizational psychologist. Thank you.
Ms. Orwig, did you have any particular response to that comment?
We have received a letter from the APA Board of Directors asking us to investigate and to query that information regarding PSYOP or IO and consulting psychologists. That is also on the agenda for the Executive Board's meeting at the end of May.
Okay. We do have industrial organizational psychologists in California who are licensed by our board. I think they were anticipating that PsyPact would allow them to work across state lines in their practice. Is that not the case?
They would still be required to meet the APA, CPA, or joint designation requirement as far as obtaining the e-passport.
Okay. I have one further question. In terms of other states that don't necessarily require, but will use APA accreditation and determination of eligibility for licensure, are there other states that have adopted PsyPact that have some portion of their licensees who are not eligible for PsyPact?
Yes, they do. We a good many of the compact states sitting at the table do have an equivalency degree evaluation, which in the compact language does spell out what that equivalency component could be. It's not just regional accreditation. There is a list of a laundry list of items that must additionally be met, but that was put into the compact language to ensure that nothing went below that. And then, like I said, with the e-passport having added the additional requirements, that falls under the must have a current e-passport to meet the requirements. But we do have, I would say probably the majority of my sitting states have an equivalency part for licensure as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. I appreciate that clarification. I want to take a poll of the board members at this moment to determine whether, and we have closed the Q&A box, is that correct?
This is the moderator. While there was talk or comments earlier, a couple more people have expressed a desire to comment.
Okay, well, let's take those comments.
Okay, so we have Charles Eckhart, and Charles, I'll let you know you've been unmuted. All right, Charles, you've been unmuted. You have 3 minutes.
Hello, this is Dr. Charles Eckhart. I wanted to first off thank the board and everybody involved for giving the public an opportunity to speak on this. I wanted to go on the record and say that it's concerning to me simply the logistics of having a meeting on a Friday, and when we open it up for public comment, it appears as though when we have 3 or 5 or 7 comments, that there are 3 or 5 or 7 people that are wanting to participate in the discussion around PsyPact. And I just want to make very clear the amount of psychologists, graduate students, and administrators associated with regionally accredited institutions in California that are deeply concerned about PsyPact and its contribution to a theoretical monoculture by cutting out regionally accredited programs that historically are responsible for providing a lot of the theoretical diversity in contribution to the field of thought in clinical psychology. I think there's something like 16,000 psychologists in the state of California, in what I can 16 or 17,000, and with very little effort, Cyan and a group of a few other clinical psychologists loosely affiliated with Cyan, we submitted a letter with almost 600 signatures, which is low to mid single digits amount of graduate students and clinical psychologists comparative to the amount in the state. I started that letter a week and a half ago. And so I just want to go on the record in saying that although there's not a lot of people here today, I think the amount of concern at the public level is pretty substantial. And to those affiliated with SciPact, I just want to make note of my concern that, amongst many other things, in requiring APA accreditation, there is a dramatic limit on the clinical psychologists licensed in the state of California who went to regionally accredited programs who represent diversity of thought, of theoretical thought.
30 seconds.
And in limiting things to only APA accredited graduates, it substantially reduces exposure for consumers to psychological services that are evidence-based and effective in a variety of different measures, and that consumers should be allowed to access. By importing psychologists from out of state who contribute to monoculture and limiting the voices of those from regionally accredited programs, I think we do a disservice to consumers.
All right.
Thank you.
And
Thank you very much.
all right, so our final request for comment is from Dr. Winkleman. And Dr. Winkleman, you've been unmuted.
Hi, it's Dr. Elizabeth Winkleman, again from the California Psychological Association. Obviously, there's a lot of concern from our members, as was pointed out by the previous caller, about the APA accreditation requirement. I wanted to point out another group that would not be eligible for practicing under the SciPact, and that is psychologists who graduated many years ago when there was no APA accreditation even available for their program, or it wasn't widely adopted. So that's another group. We have a lot of people who, practice for many years into their 60s and 70s and beyond. So that's another group I wanted to mention. And I was hoping perhaps Ms. Orwig, I wanted to thank the colleague from Louisiana for bringing up the issue of the IO psychologists, applied psychologists, and I haven't reviewed the Model Act from that perspective, or the e-passport. You said they would still need to meet all the same criteria, but I'm wondering, is it possible for them to meet those criteria? Have any consulting applied psychologists actually been able to meet that? And wondering if you could speak to that question. Thank you.
My understanding is that APA does not accredit IO and consulting programs, but the joint designation program that ASPPB did with the National Register does. So if someone came from one of those programs, they would meet the criteria.
All right, this is a moderator. That was the last request for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's closed.
Okay, I'd like to poll the board members. This doesn't prevent us from having further discussion or making a motion, to see if they feel like at this point they have sufficient information for them to consider the staff recommendation. Ms. Nystrom?
I think I have sufficient information at this time to review. To
Further discuss?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And Ms. Tate, or Dr. Tate?
I agree.
Okay. I just want to make a general comment, and then we can have a little bit more board discussion, or if somebody wants to make a motion, we can do that. I do have a number of concerns about SciPact. They're concerns that continue to be of importance to me. One of them is that the board would be undertaking additional obligations in a time where we already feel stretched thin, and our licensees and consumers and stakeholders feel the strain of limited staff resources. We're undertaking obligations without a concomitant fee source. which just further strains a budget which has been relatively strained to the breaking point, to the point where we're having to discuss the possibility of increasing licensing fees. So I also know that that is a point of sensitivity with the state legislature. Almost every statute is run through the Appropriations Committee to determine if there are fee sources for any additional actions that would be taken by state government. And in this case, there would be no additional fee resources. The second concern I have is, although I know that other states have concerns about everybody coming from an APA credentialed program, I have concerns about kind of the variability of the requirements for licensure in other states, including the continuing education requirements, which can vary fairly widely from state to state. And the third concern I have has to do with our licensees, and that is I'm not comfortable with the idea of excluding a portion of our licensees from eligibility for a program that we would join, simply based on a criteria which many people feel is an institutional criteria, but is not necessarily representative of the quality of the particular programs involved. And as speakers have pointed out, because of the APA credentialing process, a lot of the APA programs have become kind of, if not mono-theoretical, certainly very limited in the theoretical approaches that are being taught because of a particular emphasis in APA on what they euphemistically refer to as evidence-based therapies. To my knowledge, most therapies currently in use are based on evidence of their efficacy, but it really becomes a pretext for limiting us to largely cognitive behavioral interventions, which again leaves out a large part of our licensee population and takes diversity out of kind of the discourse within psychology. I also know that a lot of our regionally accredited programs are also programs where a significant portion of our licensees who represent diverse communities and identities are part of the emphasis in those programs. And I feel like in some ways restricting our licensees within a SIPAC system to only those licensees who are APA credentialed in some ways reflects almost a class system. I'm not sure of the exact statistics, but having taught in a variety of programs, some of them regionally accredited, some of them APA accredited, the amount of diversity does appear to be substantially greater in the regionally accredited programs. So I have some real misgivings about heading off in this direction. I think there's also some greater governmental questions about delegating to a quasi-governmental or a non-governmental body, to be honest, a non-governmental body authority to create regulations that will, to some extent, regulate our licensees as it relates to interjurisdictional practice. I don't feel comfortable with it. I'm not sure our legislature is going to feel comfortable with it. Historically, California has not been particularly prone to joining into these kind of compacts. And I think there may be a wisdom in that, even though it may in some ways exclude some of our licensees from opportunities they might otherwise have. So my initial inclination is certainly not to recommend to the board that we move forward with SIPACT. To say in that regard.
Did you say you were done, Dr. Phillips?
Yeah, please, Ms. Tate, or Dr. Tate. I'm sorry. You call me Ms. Tate. Well, you're both.
I'm sorry. You were very eloquent. Many of your concerns I share as well. I'm going to be less diplomatic as you, so I'm not going to be able to support SIPACT as it stands at this time. I feel like the California Board of Psychology, our job is to represent everyone. And this feels like we'd be picking one group over another, which doesn't feel fair or equal for me. So.
Thank you. Ms. Nystrom, do you have any additional initial thoughts?
Yeah, I would just share that I came into the SIPAC discussion very open-minded because one of the things that I value is for access to mental health care. And so while I understand all of the concerns that have been raised and I appreciate them, and I agree with both Dr. Tate and you, Dr. Phillips, where I'm not ready to move forward at this time. I do hope it's something that we can continue to monitor and work with and you know, continue to review as we move forward. But I just want to thank everybody for their time and information. It's been very informative today. Thank you.
Ms. Tate or Ms. Nystrom, would you like to make a motion as to what we recommend to the board?
I'm happy to make a motion that we do not.
We recommend to the board not to.
Yeah, not to participate in SIPAC. Sorry, I was having word finding issues.
And do you second, Ms. Nystrom?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Unless there's further board discussion, we can open that up again for public comment. Again, we're going to see how many commenters we have, and then we will go from there.
All right, this is a moderator, and I've opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment on this agenda item, please type. I would like to make a comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions. All right, this is the moderator, and at this time we have one member of the public that would like to make a comment.
Okay, why don't you allot them 3 minutes for their comment, if you would?
All right, so our member of the public is Melody Schaefer, and Melody, you've been unmuted.
Yes, hi, this is Dr. Schaefer from the CAPIC board, and I thank the Board of Psychology for its thoughtfulness and the decision it's made. I also thank Ms. Orwig and hope that there can be further conversation with ASPBB and its associated committees on possibly changing that criteria. I think that would be a wonderful addition and open things up to be inclusive and non-discriminatory, even though that is most, of course, likely not the reason why it developed in the way it did. But thank you so much for your presentation today as well.
All right, and we also have a request for public comment from Dr. Winkleman. So let me unmute her. All right, Dr. Winkleman, you've been unmuted.
Hi, Dr. Elizabeth Winkleman from CPA again. Wanted to thank everyone as well, Ms. Orwig and the committee, the Board Telepsychology Committee for today's meeting. I wanted to suggest that the motion may want to consider incorporating Ms. Nystrom's comment of not supporting the SIPAC at this time, but continuing to monitor it. Because as it evolves further, it may be something that makes more sense, particularly if the APA accreditation requirement is changed. And as was mentioned at the outset of the meeting, CPA does not have a formal position on this. We have a diversity, of various concerns, and our members have various concerns that have been brought forward, but do consider interjurisdictional practice to be an important issue as well. So thank you.
I don't think anything about the motion, Dr. Winkleman, would prevent us from continuing to monitor the situation should the situation change or develop in a different direction, or should thinking change on the board. So I don't know that that's necessary as an amendment, but I think the spirit of it is certainly appropriate. And the Telepsychology Committee and the board as a whole and its staff will continue to monitor the situation to determine if there have been any substantive changes in SIPAC that would make it perhaps more palatable to the board.
All right, that was the last public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's been closed.
Is there any further committee discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Proto, would you please call the motion? Or call
Yes.
the roll on the motion?
Nystrom,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
and Tate.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, so the board will be taking, or the committee will be taking to the board a motion to, to recommend, the recommendation that we do not pursue SIPAC at this time. I certainly think it's been very invaluable, and I especially want to thank our colleague from Louisiana for making themselves available and for all the hard work that the staff has done. But in particular, the clarity of the communication that we received from some licensees regarding their concerns, which have in many ways paralleled the committee's concerns. So I think it's been a very positive process. I think it is good for us to keep considering these alternatives. But at present, I don't think the situation's changed substantially enough for the board to shift its position, but that will be ultimately up to the board. This will be on the agenda of the board meeting in November. And anyone wishing to make public comment at that time can again have the opportunity to speak their piece, so to speak. And the board as a whole will consider our recommendation and then make a determination. So this is simply a recommendation of the board, and the board will ultimately take its action based on its full membership. Is there anything else we need to talk about in this regard, Ms. Sorick or Mr. McGuire?
No, the only other thing I would throw out for consideration, the staff built in ample time in case the committee was not prepared for a recommendation at the end of receiving stakeholder input and reviewing the analysis. So we did build in the November date, but since the committee was prepared for a recommendation after the full discussion today, I just want to throw out there that we could put it on the agenda for the August board meeting, which would be August 27th.
That would be great, and it would be an opportunity for any stakeholders that have not been heard, certainly to have an opportunity at that time to bring forward any of their concerns. And at that point, CPA may have adopted a formal position on SIPAC. So there's certainly room for more input from here on forward. And it would make sense if we can to bring it to the August meeting. We might as well bring this to some kind of interim conclusion and then monitor as we go.
Right. Great.
Okay. Great suggestion. Thank you. Mr. McGuire, any further concerns? Are you muted? Or unavailable? Well, I don't hear anything from Mr. McGuire at this point, so we'll continue to move on. I think that concludes most of the business portion of the agenda. I think that moves us on to agenda item number 8, which is recommendations for agenda items for future committee meetings. Again, the committee may not discuss or take action on any matter raised during this public comment section, except to decide whether to place the matter on the committee's agenda for future meetings. So committee members, do you have any additional agenda items you'd like to put on the agenda for future telepsychology committee meetings?
I do not, thank you.
I don't have one at this time.
Okay, thank you. Open this up for public comment. Is there public comment as to agenda items for future meetings of the telepsychology committee?
All right, this is the moderator, and I have opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to make a comment on this agenda item, please type. I would like to make a comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. We are displaying instructions, and we'll give you a moment. This is the moderator. I see no requests for public comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, if you would, please.
Okay, it's closed.
And finally, I would like to thank Ms. Orwig for taking time out of her considerably busy schedule to come today and give us such an informative presentation. And I certainly appreciate the attitude of open discourse and non-defensiveness in terms of the concerns we've expressed and your willingness to attempt to clarify things for us that help us in our deliberations. So thank you very much for doing that. I'm sure it's not that our current posture is not perhaps the one that ASPP would and the commission would wish for, but we very much appreciated the time you took and your patience with our process.
Thank you very much for allowing me the time to come in, and it was been very helpful. I have some good ideas and comments to take back to the commission. So again, thank you very much for allowing me to attend.
Thank you so much. And thank you for staff for doing such a wonderful job of preparing us for the meeting. And thank you to all our stakeholders for making us aware of their concerns. I don't think it's been since we proposed moving to a continuing professional development model that we've received such a flood of input. At that time, it was actually a more substantial flood of input. But I also appreciate the professionalism with which our stakeholders have approached and the respectfulness with which they've approached this interaction with the Commission and ASPPB. So that being the case, do I hear a motion for adjournment?
So move.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, well, I think we have a unanimous vote then. So this committee meeting is adjourned, and wish you all a very healthy, happy, and safe weekend. Thank you very much.
Be well. Thank you.
The meeting has ended.